Part 2. The Evidence of Witnesses, Chapter 1. Evidence of the sleeping car conductor. In the restaurant car, everything had been prepared for the inquiry. Poirot and Monsieur Book sat on one side of the table. The doctor sat on the other. On the table before Poirot lay a plan of the Istanbul-Calais coach. On every compartment, the name of the passenger occupying it was marked in red ink. Beside it lay a pile of passports and tickets. Paper, ink, a pen, and pencils were also laid out. All is in order, said Poirot. We can proceed with the investigation without further delay. First of all, I think we should hear the evidence of the sleeping car conductor. You probably know the man. What can you tell us about him? Is he a man to be trusted? I am absolutely sure of it. Pierre Michel has been in our company's service for over 15 years. He is a Frenchman living near Calais, a man of the highest integrity and honesty. However, he is not particularly brilliant. Poirot nodded understandingly. Very well. Let us see him. Pierre Michel had regained some of his former confidence, though he was still nervous. I hope Monsieur does not think there was any neglect on my part, Michel said fearfully, looking from Poirot to Book. A terrible business. I hope Monsieur does not think I have anything to do with it. Having reassured the conductor, Poirot began the questioning. First, he established Michel's name and address, then asked how long he had been with the company and on this particular line. Poirot already knew all this. He asked merely to put the man at his ease. And now, Poirot continued, let us come to the events of last night. At what time did Mr. Ratchet go to bed? Almost immediately after dinner, Monsieur. In fact, before we left Belgrade. The same as the night before. He told me to make up his bed while he was at dinner, which I did. Who entered his compartment after that? His valet, Monsieur, and the young American, his secretary. And no one else? No, Monsieur, not to my knowledge. Excellent. So you saw, or rather, heard him for the last time then? No, Monsieur. You forget. He rang for me at 20 minutes to 1, shortly after the train had stopped. Describe exactly what happened. I knocked at the door. He answered, saying that it had rung by mistake. Did he speak in French or in English? In French. Repeat his words exactly. Ce n'est rien, je me suis trompé. Correct, said Poirot. I heard the same thing myself. And then you went away? Yes, Monsieur. Did you go back to your seat? No, Monsieur. There was a bell from another compartment. So I went there first. Now, Michel, I am going to ask you a very important question. Where were you at 1:15? I, Monsieur? I was sitting on my small seat at the end of the corridor, facing the aisle. Are you sure of that? Why, yes, except for one thing. And what was that? I went into the next coach, the Athens car, to talk to a colleague. We spoke about the snowdrifts. It was just after 1 o'clock. It is hard to say the exact time. And then you returned to your own coach. When was that? Just then the bell rang. Monsieur, I remember, Monsieur. I have already told you about it. It was the American lady. She rang several times. Now I remember, too, said Poirot. And after that, Monsieur, you rang. And I brought you some mineral water. Half an hour later, I made up the bed in another compartment for the young American, Mr. Ratchet's secretary. When you went to make the bed, was Mr. McQueen alone in his compartment? The English colonel from number 15 was with him. They were talking. What did the colonel do when he left McQueen? He went back to his own compartment. Compartment 15, that is quite close to your seat, is it not? Yes, Monsieur. It is the second compartment from the end of the coach. Was the colonel's bed already made? Yes, Monsieur. I made it for him while he was at dinner. At what time did they part? I cannot say exactly, Monsieur. In any case, not later than 2 o'clock. And after that? After that, Monsieur, I sat on my seat until morning. Did you go back to the Athens coach at all? No, Monsieur. And you did not sleep? I do not think so, Monsieur. The train was standing still, so I did not feel as drowsy as one usually does when the train is in motion. Did any of the passengers pass through the corridor toward the restaurant car or back again? Did you notice? The conductor thought for a moment. I believe one of the ladies went to the toilet at the far end of the coach. Which lady? I do not know, monsieur. It was at the far end of the corridor, and I only saw her from behind. She was wearing a scarlet kimono embroidered with dragons. Poirot nodded. And after that? Everything was quiet until the morning, monsieur. Are you sure? Yes, quite sure. Oh, wait, forgive me. You yourself, monsieur. Open your door and looked out into the corridor. Excellent, my friend, said Poirot. I was wondering if you would remember that. By the way, I was awakened by a thud, something heavy striking my door. What do you think that could have been? The conductor stared at him. I do not know, monsieur. Nothing like that happened. I am certain of it. Then I must have been having a nightmare, Poirot said, not pressing the point. Perhaps, suggested Monsieur Book, you heard a noise from the neighboring compartment? Poirot acted as though he had not heard. He likely did not wish to draw the conductor's attention to that possibility. Let us move to another point, he said. Suppose a murderer joined the train last night. Are you sure he could not have left the train after committing the crime? Pierre Michel shook his head. And could he not be hiding somewhere on the train? The train has been searched, Monsieur Book remarked. So you must abandon that idea, my friend. Besides, added Michel, if anyone had passed in my coach, I would certainly have noticed it. When was the last stop? At Vinkovci. At what time? We were supposed to leave at 11:58, but because of the weather, we departed 20 minutes late. Is it possible to enter your coach from the other carriages? No, monsieur. After dinner. The door connecting the sleeping car with the rest of the train is locked. And did you yourself get off the train at Vinkovci? Yes, monsieur. I went out onto the platform and stood, as is required, by the steps leading into the train, just like all the other conductors. And what about the front door, the one near the restaurant car? The conductor was momentarily taken aback, but quickly recovered. Surely one of the passengers opened it, perhaps to look at the snowdrifts. Possibly, Poirot agreed. For a minute or two, he tapped thoughtfully on the table. Monsieur does not blame me for any neglect? The conductor asked timidly. Poirot smiled kindly. You have simply had bad luck, my friend. By the way, before I forget, one more detail. You said a bell rang at the very moment you were knocking on Mr. Ratchett's door. I heard it myself. Which compartment did it come from? From the compartment of Princess Dragomirov. She asked for her maid to be sent to her. Did you fulfill her request? Yes, monsieur. Poirot looked thoughtfully at the plan of the coach lying before him and nodded. That will be all for now, he said. Thank you, monsieur. The conductor stood up and looked at Monsieur Book. Do not be distressed, the director said good-naturedly. You are not to blame for anything. Pierre Michel, his face brightening, left the compartment. Chapter 2. The Secretary's Evidence. For a minute or two, Poirot remained lost in deep thought. Considering everything that has come to our knowledge, he said at last, I think the time has come to speak with McQueen once more. The young American did not keep them waiting. How are things going? He asked. Not too badly. Since our last conversation, I have managed to establish a few facts, and specifically, the identity of Mr. Ratchett. In a surge of curiosity, Hector McQueen leaned forward. And who was he asked. As you suspected, Ratchett was an assumed name. Behind it was Cassetti, the man who organized the most infamous kidnappings, including the sensational abduction of Daisy Armstrong. Astonishment showed on McQueen's face, but it was quickly replaced by indignation. So, it was that villain, he exclaimed. You did not guess this, Mr. McQueen? No, sir, the American said firmly. Why? I'd sooner have had my right arm cut off than work for him. Your behavior reveals a strong resentment. Have I guessed correctly, Mr. McQueen? I have a particular reason. My father was the district attorney who handled that case. I had the chance to meet Mrs. Armstrong many times. She was a woman of rare charm and extraordinary kindness. The tragedy broke her. McQueen's face hardened. If ever a man got what he deserved, it was Ratchet or Cassetti, whatever his name was. It serves him right. To kill such a scoundrel is a righteous act. You speak as though you would have gladly taken that righteous act upon yourself. Exactly. Why, He paused, flushing. It sounds like I'm convicting myself. I should have been more suspicious of you, Mr. McQueen, if you had begun to mourn excessively over the death of your employer. I don't think I could have done that even under pain of death, McQueen said grimly. If you don't find my curiosity out of place, please tell me, how did you manage to, establish Cassetti's identity? By a fragment of a letter found in the compartment. But surely, would the old man have been so careless? It depends on how one looks at it, Poirot remarked. The young man was clearly puzzled by this comment. He looked at Poirot with bewilderment, trying to understand what he meant. My task, Poirot said, is to find out what every passenger, without exception, was doing yesterday. No one should take offense, you understand? These are merely formalities. Of course. Start with me, and I'll try to clear myself of suspicion, if I can. I do not need to ask for your compartment number. Poirot smiled. Yesterday, I was your neighbor. It is a second-class compartment, berths number 6 and 7. After I moved to another compartment, you were left there alone. That is correct. And now, Mr. McQueen, I ask you to tell me everything you did after you left the dining car. Nothing could be simpler. I went back to my compartment, read for a bit, went out for a stroll on the platform at Belgrade, but I got cold and came right back to the train. I spoke for a little while with the young English lady from the next compartment. Then I got into a conversation with an Englishman, Colonel Arbuthnot. By the way, I think you passed us in the corridor. I looked in on Mr. Ratchet and, as I already told you, took down some instructions regarding his letters. I wished him good night and left. Colonel Arbuthnot was still standing in the corridor. His bed had already been made, so I invited him to my place. I ordered drinks, and we had a couple of glasses. We talked about international politics, about India, and our problems regarding the current financial situation and the Wall Street crash. As a rule, I don't care much for Englishmen. They're usually so stiff. But I took a liking to the colonel. Do you remember when he left you? Quite late. About 2 o'clock, I should say. Did you notice that the train had stopped? Sure. We even wondered why. We looked out the window and saw there was a lot of snow, but it didn't worry us. What happened after Colonel Arbuthnot said good night? He went to his own compartment, and I asked the conductor to make up my bed. Where were you while he was making the bed? I was standing in the corridor outside my compartment, smoking, and then I went to bed and slept until morning. Did you leave the train at any point yesterday evening? Arbuthnot, and I thought about getting some exercise at, Vinkovci, but it was freezing cold, and a blizzard was starting, so we went back into the car. Through which door did you leave the train? Through the one nearest my compartment. The one next to the dining car? Yes. Do you remember if the bolt was fastened? McQueen thought for a moment. Let me see. I think it was. In any case, some kind of bar was passed through the handle. Does that interest you? Yes. When you returned to the car, did you slide the bar back? Why, no, I don't think I did. I was the last one in. I don't remember exactly. Is it important? He asked suddenly. It might be important. Now then, monsieur, as I understand it, while you and Colonel Arbuthnot were sitting in your compartment, the door to the corridor was open. Hector McQueen nodded. Tell me, please, if you remember, did anyone pass along the corridor after we left Vinkovci, but before the colonel went to his room? McQueen wrinkled his brow. Once, I think, the conductor went by. He was coming from the dining car, and then a woman went past, but she was going toward the diner. What kind of woman? I don't know. I didn't see her clearly. Arbuthnot. and I were in the middle of an argument. I only remember some scarlet silk flashing past the door. I was looking closely, and besides, I wouldn't have seen her face anyway. I was sitting facing the restaurant, so I could only see her back as she passed the door. Poirot nodded. As I understand it, she was heading to the toilet? I suppose so. Did you see her return? Actually, no. Now that I think of it, I really didn't see her come back. I probably just didn't notice. One more question. Do you smoke a pipe, Mr. McQueen? No, sir. Poirot was silent for a minute. Well, that is all for now. And now I should like to speak with Mr. Ratchett's valet. By the way, did you always travel second class with him? He always did. I usually traveled in first, and whenever possible, in a compartment adjoining Mr. Ratchett's. He kept most of the luggage in my room, so both I and the bags were close at hand. However, this time all the first-class compartments, except for the one he occupied, were already taken. I see. Thank you, Mr. McQueen. Chapter 3. The Evidence of the Valet. The American was succeeded by the Englishman with the expressionless, sallow face whom Poirot had observed the previous day. He stood in the doorway, exactly as a well-trained servant should. Poirot gestured for him to be seated. I understand you are Mr. Ratchett's valet? I am, sir. What is your name? Edward Henry Masterman. How old are you? 39. What is your home address? 21 Friar Street, Clerkenwell. You have heard that your master has been murdered? I have, sir. Will you tell me, please, when you last saw Mr. Ratchett? The valet reflected for a moment. Last night, sir, at about 9 o'clock, or perhaps a little later. Describe the circumstances of your last meeting in detail. I went to Mr. Ratchett, sir, as was my custom, to attend to him before he retired. Describe exactly what your duties entailed. I had to fold and hang up his clothes, sir, put his false teeth in water, and see that he had everything he required. Did he behave as usual? The valet thought for a second. It seemed to me, sir, that he was upset. In what way? By a letter he was reading. He asked if I had brought it. I told, of course, that I had not, but he used very strong language and found fault with everything I did. Was that unusual for him? Oh, no, sir. He was a very short-tempered gentleman. He would fly into a passion over the slightest thing. Did your master ever take sleeping draughts? Dr. Constantine leaned forward eagerly. Always when traveling, sir. He said he could never sleep otherwise. Do you know what kind of sleeping medicine he usually took? I cannot say, sir. There was no name on the bottle, just the words, the sleeping draught, to be taken at bedtime. Did he take it last night? He did, sir. I poured it into a glass and placed it on the dressing table. Did you actually see him drink it? No, sir. And what happened then? I asked if there was anything further he required, and inquired at what time I should call him this morning. He told me not to disturb him until he rang. Was that his usual practice? Yes, sir. He would usually ring for the conductor and send him for me when he was ready to get up. Did he usually rise early or late? It depended on his mood, sir. Sometimes he would be up for breakfast, sometimes not until lunch. So you were not worried when it drew toward lunch and he had not sent for you? No, sir. Were you aware that your master had enemies? I was, sir, the valet replied impassively. How did you know that? I had heard him discussing certain letters with Mr. McQueen, sir. Were you fond of your master, Masterman? Masterman's face, if such a thing were possible, became even more expressionless than before. I should prefer not to say, sir. He was a generous employer. But you did not like him? Shall we say, sir, that I have no taste for Americans? Have you ever been to America? No, sir. Did you read in the newspapers about the kidnapping of the Armstrong baby? The sallow face of the valet turned slightly pink. I did indeed, sir. A little girl, was it not? A most shocking affair. Were you aware that your master, Mr. Ratchett, was the principal organizer of that kidnapping? Certainly not, sir. For the first time, a note of indignation entered the valet's quiet voice. I cannot believe that, sir. Nevertheless, it is true. Now, let us come to your own movements last night. You understand that these are merely formalities. What did you do after leaving your master? I told Mr. McQueen that the master wanted him, sir. Then I went to my own compartment and read. Your compartment is... I have the last second-class compartment, sir, at the end nearest the restaurant car. Poirot looked at the plan. I see. And which berth do you occupy? The lower one, sir. That would be number 4? Yes, sir. Is there anyone else in the compartment with you? Yes, sir. A big Italian man. Does he speak English? After a fashion, sir, the valet said contemptuously. He has lived in America, in Chicago, I believe. Did you talk to him much? No, sir. I prefer to read. Poirot smiled. He could well imagine this gentleman's gentleman coldly rebuffing the talkative Italian. And what were you reading, if I may ask? At present, sir, I am reading Love's Captive by Mistress Arabella Richardson. Is it a good book? Very entertaining, sir. Well, let us continue. You returned to your compartment and read Love's Captive until, at about 10:30, sir, the Italian wanted to go to bed. The conductor came and made up the berths. And after that, you went to sleep? I went to bed, sir, but I did not sleep. Why was that? Could you not rest? I had the toothache, sir. Oh, I see. That is very painful. Most distressing, sir. Did you take anything for it? I applied some oil of cloves, sir. It eased the pain a little, but I still could not sleep. I turned on my reading light and continued to read to take my mind off it. Did you not sleep at all during the night? No, sir. I only dozed off around 4 a.m. And your companion, the Italian? He was snoring away, sir. Did he leave the compartment during the night? No, sir. Did you? No, sir. Did you hear anything during the night? No, sir. Nothing unusual, that is. The train was standing still, so it was very quiet. Poirot was silent for a moment. Then he said, Well, I think we have covered everything. Is there anything else you can tell us that might help clear up this tragedy? I am afraid not, sir. I am very sorry. Do you know if your master and Mr. McQueen ever had any quarrels? Oh, no, sir. Mr. McQueen is a very pleasant gentleman. Who were you with before you came to Mr. Ratchet? Sir Henry Tomlinson, sir, in Grosvenor Square. Why did you leave him? He was going to East Africa, sir, and no longer require my services. But I am sure Sir Henry would give me a character, sir. I was with him for several years. How long had you been with Mr. Ratchet? Just over 9 months, sir. Thank you, Masterman. By the way, are you a pipe smoker? No, sir. I smoke only cigarettes. Inexpensive ones, sir. Thank you. That will be all for now. With a nod, Poirot dismissed him. The valet did not get up at once. He seemed to hesitate. Begging your pardon, sir, but that elderly American lady, she is, as they say, on the warpath. She says she knows all about the murderer. She is very much worked up, sir. In that case, Poirot smiled, we must see her without delay. Shall I send her in, sir? She has been demanding to see the authorities for some time. The conductor is having quite a time trying to quiet her. Send her to us, my friend, said Poirot. We will hear all she has to say. Chapter 4. The Evidence of the Elderly American Lady. When Mrs. Hubbard burst into the dining car, out of breath and trembling with excitement, she could hardly speak. Now, you just tell me this. Who is in charge here? I have something very, very important to tell the authorities. And if you gentlemen... Her gaze swept across the compartment. Poirot moved closer to her. You may tell me, madam, he said, but I implore you, please take a seat. Mrs. Hubbard flopped heavily onto the seat opposite him. Now, here's what I have to tell you. There was a murder on this train last night, and the murderer was in my compartment. She paused dramatically, waiting for her statement to be fully appreciated. Are you sure of that, madam? Of course I am sure. What do you take me for? Thank goodness. I haven't lost my mind yet. I am going to tell you everything exactly as it happened. Now, I had gone to bed and fallen asleep when suddenly I woke up. It was pitch dark in the compartment, of course, but I felt that there was a man right there. I was so terrified I couldn't even scream. You know how it is. So I just lay there thinking, heaven help me, I'm going to be killed. I simply cannot tell you what I went through. I thought about these awful trains and how many murders happen on them. The newspapers are full of it. And then I thought, well, he's not getting my jewels. Because, you see, I had tucked them into a stocking and hidden them under my pillow. It's not very comfortable, I can tell you. It makes for a hard night's sleep, but you know how it is. But I'm getting off track. Now, where was I? You felt, madam, that there was a man in your compartment. Yes. So there I was, lying with my eyes shut, thinking, what shall I do? And I thought, thank goodness my daughter doesn't know what a predicament I'm in. But then I pulled myself together, felt along the wall for the button to call the conductor. I pressed and pressed, but no one came. I thought my heart was going to stop. Mercy me, I said to myself, maybe they've murdered everyone on the train. The train was standing still, and the silence was just creepy. I kept pressing that bell, and then, thank the Lord, I heard footsteps in the corridor and a knock at the door. Come in. I shouted, and I flipped on the light. And would you believe it? There wasn't a soul in the room. Mrs. Hubbard clearly regarded this as a dramatic climax of her story, rather than a disappointing conclusion. And what happened then, madam? Well, I told the conductor all about it, but he didn't seem to believe me. He looked as if he thought I just dreamed it. Of course, I made him look under the berth, even though he said no human being could possibly squeeze under there. It was obvious the man had escaped, but he had been in my compartment, and it just makes me boil when a conductor tries to patronize me. Thank goodness, nobody has ever called me a liar yet, Mr. I don't believe I know your name. Poirot, madam. And this is Monsieur Book, a director of the company, and Dr. Constantine. Mrs. Hubbard gave them all a vague, pleased to meet you, and continued with single-minded intensity. Now, mind you, I'm not saying I figured it all out right away. At first, I thought it was my neighbor, you know, that poor man who was murdered. I made the conductor check at the door between our compartments was locked, and sure enough, the bolt wasn't fastened. But I took precautions immediately. I had the conductor bolted, and as soon as he left, I got up and shoved my suitcase against the door just to be safe. At what time did this happen, Mrs. Hubbard? I couldn't tell you exactly. I was so upset I didn't look at the clock. And how do you explain what occurred? Explain it? Why, it's as plain as day. The murderer was in my compartment. Who else could it have been? So, you believe he escaped into the next compartment? How should I know where he went? I had my eyes squeezed shut the whole time. So, he could have escaped through the neighbor's compartment into the corridor? I couldn't say. I told you, my eyes were closed. Mrs. Hubbard gave a shaky sigh. Goodness, I was scared. If only my daughter knew. And you don't think, madam, that you might have heard noises coming from the next compartment, from the victim's room? No, I do not. Mr., whatever your name is, Poirot, that man was in my compartment. There's no use arguing, because I have proof. Mrs. Hubbard triumphantly reached under the table for a massive handbag and dived into it. From its bottomless depths, she retrieved 2 large, sensible handkerchiefs, a pair of horn-rimmed glasses, a packet of aspirin, some smelling salts, a plastic tube of bright green mint, a ring of keys, a pair of scissors, a checkbook, a photograph of a remarkably plain child, several letters, 5 strands of oriental beads, and finally, a small metal object that, upon closer inspection, turned out to be a button. Do you see this button? Well, it's not my button. I don't have anything like it on any of my clothes. I found it this morning when I got up. She laid the button on the table. Monsieur Book leaned forward. That is a button from a conductor's uniform, he exclaimed. But there might be a natural explanation for that, said Poirot. This button, madam, could have fallen off the conductor's tunic while he was searching the compartment or making her bed last night. Oh, why can't any of you see it? It's like you're all in a conspiracy. Now listen, last night, before I went to sleep, I was reading a magazine. Before I turned out the light, I put that magazine on my little suitcase. It was sitting right by the window. Do you understand? They assured her that they understood. Now then, she continued, the conductor stayed right by the door while he looked on the berth. Then he went over to the door to the next compartment and made sure it was closed. He never went near the window. But this morning, there was that button sitting right on my magazine. Now, what do you say to that? I say, madam, that it is evidence, Poirot explained. This answer seemed to satisfy the American lady considerably. Well, it's just that when people don't believe me, I get so frustrated I could climb the walls, she said. You have given us very interesting and highly valuable testimony, Poirot assured her. Now, would you mind answering a few more questions? Why, not at all. I'd be glad to. How did it happen, madam, since Mr. Ratchet had frightened you so, that you did not lock the door between your compartments? But I did, Mrs. Hubbard countered immediately. Is that so? Certainly. If you want to know the truth, I asked that Swedish lady, a very kind soul, by the way, to see if the bolt was fastened, and she assured me that it was. And why didn't you look yourself? I was already in bed, and my sponge bag was hanging on the door handle. It covers the bolt from view. What time was this? Let me see. It must have been about 10:30, or maybe 11:15. She had come in to ask me for some aspirin. I told her where to find it, and she got out of my bag. You did not get out of bed during all this time? No, she suddenly chuckled. The poor thing was in quite a state. You see, she had opened the door to the next compartment by mistake first. Mr. Ratchet's compartment? Yes. You know how easy it is to confuse the doors when they are all closed. She walked right in on him. She was terribly upset. I make mistake, she kept saying. I am so ashamed I make mistake. She said he was a very bad man. Apparently, he just laughed and said something quite rude. The poor creature was trembling. She said he told her, "You are too old." Dr. Constantine stifled a laugh. Mrs. Hubbard shot him a frosty look. A true gentleman would never say such a thing to a lady. There is absolutely nothing to laugh at. Dr. Constantine hurried to apologize. After that, did you hear any noise from Mr. Ratchet's compartment? Poirot asked. Well, not really. What do you mean by that, madam? Well, she hesitated. He was snoring. Ah, so he was snoring? Vigorously. The night before, I couldn't get a wink of sleep because of it. And after you were so frightened by the man in your compartment, you didn't hear the snoring any more? How could I, Mr. Poirot? The man was dead. Ah, yes, you are right. Poirot agreed, looking slightly embarrassed. Do you remember the Daisy Armstrong kidnapping, Mrs. Hubbard? Do I remember it? I should say so. To think that that villain, that kidnapper, got off scot-free. If I ever got my hands on him. He did not escape punishment, madam. He is dead. He died last night. You don't mean to say... Mrs. Hubbard actually started up from her seat. You have guessed it, madam. Ratchet was the man who kidnapped the child. Well, for land's sake, I must write to my daughter about this immediately. Didn't I tell you last night that the man had a terrible face? You see, I was right. My daughter always says, if mother suspects someone, you can bet your last dollar they're a bad lot. Were you acquainted with any of the Armstrongs, Mrs. Hubbard? No. They moved in very high circles. But I was told that Mrs. Armstrong was a woman of singular charm, and that her husband absolutely adored her. Well, Mrs. Hubbard, you've been of immense help to us. Truly invaluable. Now, would you be so kind as to give us your full name? Certainly. Caroline Martha Hubbard. And please write your address right here. Mrs. Hubbard complied, chattering all the while. I just can't get over it. Cassetti right here on this train. But he looked suspicious to me from the start. Didn't he, Mr. Poirot? Quite right, madam. By the way, Do you happen to own a red silk dressing gown? Mercy, what a strange question. No, of course not. I have two with me. A pink flannel one, very warm and practical for traveling, and another one my daughter gave me, an oriental style in crimson silk. But for goodness sake, why are you interested in my dressing gowns? You see, madam, last night a certain person in a red kimono entered either your compartment or Mr. Ratchet's. As you just rightly pointed out, when the doors are closed, it is easy to mistake one for the other. Well, no person in a red kimono entered my room. Then she must have entered Mr. Ratchet's. Mrs. Hubbard pursed her lips and said sourly, "That doesn't surprise me one bit. So, you heard a woman's voice in the next compartment?" Poirot asked her. "I don't know how you guessed that, Mr. Poirot. Honestly, I don't. To tell you the truth, I did." "Then why, when I asked you what you heard through the wall, did you say you only heard Mr. Ratchet snoring?" "Because that was the truth. He did snore for quite a long time. But then—" Mrs. Hubbard flushed. "Well, one doesn't like to talk about such things. When did you hear the woman's voice?" "I couldn't tell you. I woke up for a minute, heard a woman talking, and realized it was coming from the next room. I thought to myself, what else can you expect from a man like that? And went back to sleep. I would never have mentioned it in front of three strange men if you hadn't practically forced it out of me. Was this before you felt the man was in your compartment, or after? There you go again, making the same mistake. How could that woman be talking to him if he was already dead?" "Forgive me, madam. I must seem very stupid to you, must I not? Well, I guess even you have to be wrong sometimes. I just can't get over the fact that my neighbor was at Villeneuve. I simply can't imagine what my daughter will say." Poirot gallantly helped the lady gather her belongings into her bag and escorted her toward the door. "You dropped your handkerchief, madam," he called out just as she was about to leave. Mrs. Hubbard looked at the tiny square of fine cambric held out to her. "That is not my handkerchief, Mr. Poirot. I have mine right here." "My apologies, madam. I thought, since it bears the letter H, the initial of your surname, Hubbard, it is a curious coincidence, but it is not my handkerchief nonetheless. Mine are marked with the initial CM, H, and they are sensible, practical handkerchiefs, not some flimsy Parisian trinkets. I mean, what is the use of a handkerchief if you can't even blow your nose in it?" And since none of the men could find an answer to her question, Mrs. Hubbard made a triumphant exit from the car. Chapter 5. The Evidence of the Swedish Lady. Monsieur Book twirled the button left behind by Mrs. Hubbard in his fingers. "I cannot understand what this button signifies. Does it mean that Pierre Michel is involved in the murder after all?" He paused, but receiving no reply from Poirot, he continued, "What do you say, my friend?" "This object leads us to many different suppositions," Poirot said thoughtfully. "But before we discuss the latest evidence, let us call the Swedish lady." He looked through the passports lying on the table. "Ah, here it is, Greta Olsen, 49 years of age." Monsieur Book gave an order to steward, and soon he returned with a middle-aged lady with a bun of yellowish-gray hair at the back of her head. Her long, kind face had something sheep-like about it. Her near-sighted eyes peered at Poirot from behind her spectacles, but she showed no signs of distress. It turned out that she understood French, so they decided to conduct a conversation in that language. At first, Poirot asked her about things he already knew, her name, age, and address. Then he inquired about her occupation. She stated that she worked as a matron in a missionary school near Istanbul. By training, she was a nurse. "You are aware, of course, of what happened last night, mademoiselle?" "Of course. It was terrible, and the American lady says the murderer was in her compartment. As I understand it, mademoiselle, you were the last person to see the dead man alive?" "I do not know. It is quite possible. I opened the door to his compartment by mistake. I was so ashamed. It was such an awkward moment. Did you see him? Yes. He was reading a book. I apologized immediately and left. Did he say anything to you? The honorable lady blushed. He laughed and said something. I did not quite catch what it was. What did you do then, mademoiselle? Poirot asked, tactfully changing the subject. I went to the American lady, Mrs. Hubbard, to ask her for some aspirin, and she gave me a tablet. Did she ask you to see if the bolt was fastened on the door connecting her compartment with that of Mr. Ratchet? Yes. Was the bolt fastened? Yes. What did you do after that? I went back to my compartment, took the aspirin, and lay down. What time was that? I went to bed at 11:05. I looked at the dial before winding my watch, so I can say for certain. Did you fall asleep quickly? Not very. My headache had stopped, but I lay awake for some time. When you fell asleep, was the train already standing still? I don't think so. I believe we stopped at a station just as I was drifting off. That would be Vinkovci. Now tell me, mademoiselle, which is your compartment, this one? Poirot pointed to the plan. Yes, that is it. Do you occupy the upper or the lower berth? The lower, number 10. Do you have a companion? Yes, monsieur, a young English lady. Very nice and very amiable. She is traveling from Baghdad. After the train left Vinkovci, did she leave the compartment? No, I know that for certain. How do you know if you were asleep? I am a very light sleeper. The slightest noise wakes me. To get out, she would have had to climb down from the upper berth, and I would surely have woken up. And did you leave the compartment yourself? Not until morning. Do you own a red silk kimono, mademoiselle? What a strange question. I have a very practical knitted dressing gown. And your companion, Miss Debenham? Can you say what color her dressing gown is? A mauve burnous without sleeves, the kind they sell in the East. Poirot nodded. And where are you going? On holiday? He asked in a friendly tone. Yes, going home on holiday. First, I shall spend a week in Lausanne to visit my sister. Would you be so kind as to write down your sister's name and address? With pleasure. She wrote the name and address on the slip of paper Poirot handed her. Have you ever been to America, mademoiselle? No, though I nearly went there once. I was to accompany an invalid lady, but the trip was canceled at the last moment, which I regretted very much. Americans are good people. They give much money to hospitals and schools, and they are very practical. Tell me, did you ever hear the kidnapping of the Armstrong child? No, what was that? Poirot explained the circumstances of the case. Greta Olson was horrified. The gray bun at the back of her head bobbed with indignation. I simply cannot believe there are such wicked people in the world. It is a trial of our faith. That poor mother. My heart breaks with pity for her. The kind Swedish lady moved toward the exit, her cheeks flushed and her eyes filled with tears. Poirot was busily writing something on a piece of paper. What are you writing there, my friend? Asked Monsieur Book. My friend, method and order in everything. That is my motto. I am making a chronological table of events. Having finished, he handed the paper to Monsieur Book. 9:15. The train departs from Belgrade. Approximately 9:40. The valet leaves Ratchet, leaving a sleeping draft on the table. Approximately 10 o'clock. McQueen leaves Ratchet. Approximately 10:40. Greta Olson sees Ratchet. She is the last to see him alive. Note, well, Ratchet is not asleep. He is reading a book. 0 hours 10 minutes. The train departs from Vinkovci, delayed. 0 hours 30 minutes. The train enters a snowdrift. 0 hours 37 minutes. Ratchet's bell rings. The conductor goes to the door. Ratchet answers. Ce n'est rien. J'ai mis suis trompe. Approximately 1:17. Mrs. Hubbard thinks there's a man in her compartment. She summons a conductor. Monsieur Book nodded approvingly. It is all very clear, he said. Does nothing here surprise you? Does nothing seem suspicious? No. To my mind, everything is perfectly clear and precise. Obviously, the crime was committed at 1:15. We have the evidence of the watch, and Mrs. Hubbard's testimony confirms it. I will venture a guess. If you ask me, my friend, I would say the Italian killed Ratchet. He lives in America, in Chicago no less. And do not forget, the knife is the national weapon of Italians. Furthermore, the murderer was not satisfied with a single blow. That is true. In this, and only in this, lies the key to the mystery. I am certain he was in the same gang as Ratchet. Cassetti is an Italian name. Clearly, Ratchet double-crossed him, as they say in America. The Italian tracked him down, sent threatening letters, and then came this brutal revenge. It is all very simple. Poirot shook his head thoughtfully. I fear it is not quite so simple, he murmured. I am sure that is exactly how it happened, said Monsieur Book, growing more and more fond of his theory. And what do you say to the valet's evidence? He had a toothache that kept him awake. He swears the Italian never left the compartment. That is the only snag. A flash of mockery appeared in Poirot's eyes. Yes, it is most unfortunate. Mr. Ratchet's valet had a toothache, and while that upsets your version, it certainly helps our friend the Italian. An explanation will be found for that later, Monsieur Book said with enviable confidence. Poirot shook his head. No, it is not quite so simple, he murmured again. Chapter 6, The Evidence of the Russian Princess. Now, suggested Poirot, let's hear what Pierre Michel has to say about this button. The conductor was summoned. His eyes searched theirs, filled with unspoken questions. Monsieur Book cleared his throat. Michel, he began, here is a button from your uniform. It was found in the American ladies' compartment. What have you to say for yourself? The conductor's hand moved instinctively to his jacket. All my buttons are in place, monsieur. You must be mistaken. How very strange. I wouldn't know, monsieur. The man was clearly surprised, but he showed no sign of embarrassment or guilt. Monsieur Book spoke with weighted emphasis. Given the circumstances under which this button was found, we can only conclude that it was lost by the person who was in Mrs. Hubbard's compartment last night, at the exact moment she rang for you. But there was no one there, monsieur. The lady must have imagined it. She imagined nothing, Michel. Mr. Ratchet's murderer passed through her compartment and dropped this button. As the weight of Monsieur Book's words sank in, Pierre Michel fell into a state of visible agitation. That is not true, monsieur. It is not true, he cried. Are you accusing me of murder? Me? But I am innocent. I have done nothing. Why would I kill Mr. Ratchet? I had never even set eyes on the man before. Where were you when Mrs. Hubbard's bell rang? I told you, monsieur, I was in the next carriage, talking to my colleague. We shall send for him. Please, monsieur, I beg of you, send for him at once. The conductor from the neighboring carriage arrived and promptly confirmed Pierre Michel's story. He added that the conductor from the Bucharest carriage had also been present. They had been discussing the snowdrifts for about 10 minutes when Michel thought he heard a bell. He opened the door to his own carriage, and this time they all heard it, a persistent, urgent ringing. Michel had rushed back immediately. You see now, monsieur, I am innocent. Michel stammered, looking lost. Then how do you explain this button appearing in that compartment? I do not know, monsieur. I cannot fathom it. All my buttons are where they should be. The other two conductors also declared that they had lost no buttons, nor had they entered Mrs. Hubbard's compartment. Calm yourself, Michel, said Monsieur Book. Think back to the moment you heard the bell and ran to your carriage. Tell me, did you meet anyone in the corridor? No, monsieur. And no one was walking toward the dining car? Again, no, monsieur. Strange, remarked Monsieur Book. Not entirely, Poirot countered. It is a question of timing. Mrs. Hubbard wakes up and realizes there is a man in her compartment. For a minute or two, she lies there with her eyes shut, terrified to move. What if, during that time, the man slipped out into the corridor? She then rings for the conductor. He does not arrive immediately. He responds only after the third or fourth ring. To my mind, the killer had ample time. For what, my friend? For what? Remember, the train is surrounded by snowdrifts on all sides. Our mysterious killer has two options. Poirot said with measured deliberation. He could retreat into one of the toilets or vanish into a compartment. But every compartment is occupied. Precisely, said Poirot. Are you suggesting he could have retreated into his own compartment? Poirot nodded. Yes, it all fits, muttered Monsieur Book. During those 10 minutes when the conductor is absent, the killer leaves his own compartment, enters Ratchet's, kills him, locks the door from the inside with the key and the chain, slips into the corridor through Mrs. Hubbard's compartment, and by the time the conductor returns, he is sitting safely back in his own seat. It is not quite so simple as that, my friend, Poirot grunted. Our dear doctor here will tell you the same. With a wave of his hand, Monsieur Book dismissed the conductors. We still have 8 passengers to interview, Poirot announced. 5 from the first class. Princess Dragomirov, Count and Countess Andrenyi, Colonel Arbuthnot and Mr. Hardman, and 3 from the second class, Miss Debenham, Antonio Foscarelli, and the princess's maid, Fräulein Schmidt. Shall we call the Italian first? You have quite a fixation on this Italian. No, we shall start at the top. Would Princess Dragomirov be so kind as to spare us a few moments? Give her our request, Michel. I will, monsieur, the conductor said as he stepped out. Tell her that if Her Highness does not wish to come here, we shall come to her compartment. Monsieur Book shouted after him. However, Princess Dragomirov did not take him up on the offer. Shortly after, she entered the dining car, gave the men a slight nod, and sat down opposite Poirot. Her small, toad-like face seemed even more sallow than the day before. She was ugly. There was no denying it. But her eyes, completing the resemblance to a toad, were like dark, commanding jewels, glowing with intelligence and energy. Her voice was low and slightly rasping, her diction precise. She cut short Monsieur Book's flowery apologies with a sharp gesture. There is no need for apologies, messrs. I am aware that a murder has occurred on this train. It is only natural that you must question the passengers. I shall be happy to assist in any way I can. You are most kind, madam, said Poirot. Not at all. It is my duty. What is it you wish to ask? Your full name and address, madam. Would you care to write them down? Poirot held out a sheet of paper and a pencil, but she waved them away. Write it yourself, she suggested. It is simple enough. Natalia Dragomirov, 17, Avenue Kleber, Paris. You are returning home from Constantinople, madam? Yes, I was staying at the Austrian embassy there. My maid is traveling with me. Would you be so kind as to tell me, briefly, what you did last night after dinner? Gladly. I sent for the conductor while still in the dining car to have my bed made. I retired immediately after dinner. I read until 11 o'clock, then turned out the light. I could not sleep. I suffer from rheumatism. At 1:45, I rang for my maid. She gave me a massage and read aloud to me until I felt drowsy. I cannot say exactly how long she stayed. Perhaps half an hour, perhaps longer. Was the train already at a standstill by then? Yes. And did you hear anything unusual during that time, madam? No. What is your maid's name? Hildegard Schmidt. Has she been in your service long? 15 years. You trust her? Completely. She comes from my late husband's estate. I believe you have spent time in America, madam. The sudden turn in the conversation surprised the princess. She arched an eyebrow. Frequently. Were you acquainted with the Armstrongs? The family involved in that famous tragedy. They were my friends, monsieur. A flicker of emotion touched the old lady's voice. Then you knew Colonel Armstrong well. I knew him only slightly, but his wife, Sonia Armstrong, was my goddaughter. I was a close friend of her mother, the actress Linda Arden, a magnificent artist, one of the greatest tragic actresses in the world. As Lady Macbeth or Magda, she had no equal. I was not only her admirer, but her devoted friend. Is she dead? No, but she lives in total seclusion. Her health is very fragile, and she rarely leaves her bed. She had another daughter, if I remember correctly. Yes, much younger than Mrs. Armstrong. Is she still living? Certainly. And where is she? The old woman cast a searching look at Poirot. I must ask why you are questioning me like this. What does any of this have to do with the murder you are investigating? It is this. The murdered man was responsible for the kidnapping and death of Mrs. Armstrong's child. I see. The princess's brow darkened. She drew herself up. In that case, I can only welcome this murder. I trust you will understand my prejudice. Perfectly. Now, back to the question you did not answer. Where is Linda Arden's younger daughter, Mrs. Armstrong's sister? Now, to be honest, monsieur, I do not know. I have lost touch with the younger generation. I believe she married an Englishman some years ago and went to England, but his name escapes me. She paused and added, Is there anything else you wish to ask, messrs? One more question, madam. A personal one this time. What color is your dressing gown? The princess arched her eyebrow again. I trust you are not motivated by idle curiosity. It is blue satin. We have no more questions for you, madam. I am very grateful to you for answering so willingly. A ring-laden hand stirred. The princess rose, and the men rose with her, but she was in no hurry to leave. Forgive me, monsieur, she said, but would you mind telling me your name? Your face is familiar to me. Hercule Poirot, at your service, madam. She paused. Hercule Poirot, she said after a long moment. Now I remember. This is destiny. She moved toward the door, walking with great effort, yet maintaining an incredibly upright, regal posture. Voila une grande dame, Monsieur Book remarked. What do you make of her, my friend? Poirot merely shook his head. Destiny, he repeated. I wonder exactly what you meant by that. Chapter 7. The Evidence of the Count and Countess Andrenyi. Following the princess, Count and Countess Andrenyi were summoned. However, the Count appeared alone, at close quarters. His good looks were even more striking, broad-shouldered, slim-waisted, and tall. Had it not been for his long mustache and prominent cheekbones, his well-tailored suit might have allowed him to pass for an Englishman. Now, then, gentlemen, how can I be of service to you? He asked. You see, monsieur, said Poirot, the circumstances compel us to interview every passenger. Of course, the Count replied graciously. I quite understand, though I fear my wife and I can be of little help. We were asleep and heard nothing at all. Do you know who was killed? I understand it was a tall American with a singularly unpleasant face. He sat at that table over there. The Count nodded toward the table previously occupied by Ratchet and McQueen. Precisely, monsieur. I wanted to ask if you were acquainted with the man's name. Poirot's questions clearly puzzled the Count. If you wish to know his name, surely you can consult his passport? It should all be there. The passport bears the name Ratchet. But that was not his real name. Poirot explained. In truth, he was Cassetti, the mastermind behind numerous kidnappings and the brutal murders of children. He watched the Count intently, but the revelation seemed to make no deep impression. The Count looked surprised, but nothing more. Is that so? He remarked. That certainly sheds some light on the murder. America is a very strange country. You have perhaps been there, Monsieur le Comte? I spent a year in Washington. Then you likely knew the Armstrong family? Armstrong. I cannot say I recall the name. One meets so many people. The Count smiled and shrugged his shoulders. But let us not wander, gentlemen. How else may I be of use? Tell me, Count, when did you retire to bed? Poirot stole a quick glance at the floor plan. Count and Countess Andrenyi occupied adjoining compartments, numbers 12 and 13. We requested the bed be made up in one compartment, and when we returned from the dining car, we settled in the other. That was compartment number 13. We were playing piquet. Around 11 o'clock, my wife went to bed. The conductor made up my berth. I also turned in and slept until morning. Did you notice that the train had stopped? I only learned of it this morning. And your wife? The Count smiled. My wife always takes a sleeping draught when traveling by train. Last night, she took her usual dose of Trianol. He paused and added, I am very sorry, but I truly cannot help you further. Poirot handed the Count a sheet of paper and a pencil. Thank you, Count. It is a mere formality, but nevertheless, I must ask you to write your name and address here. The Count wrote, forming the words with great care. Perhaps it is better that I write myself, he said politely. The name of my family estate is rather difficult for those who do not know Hungarian. The Count handed the paper to Poirot and rose. There is no need for my wife to come. She knows nothing beyond what I have told you. Poirot's eyes twinkled shrewdly. Of course. And yet, I would still very much like to ask the Countess just one little question. I assure you it is quite useless. A metallic ring entered the Count's voice. Poirot blinked, looking slightly embarrassed. A pure formality, he said. But, you understand, quite necessary for my report. As you wish, the Count yielded reluctantly. He gave a short bow in the continental fashion and left the carriage. Poirot reached for the passport. The Count's name, surname, and titles were all there. Further down it read, accompanied by his wife. Name, Elena Maria. Maiden name, Goldenberg. Age, 20. Right over the name was a large, greasy smudge, evidently the fingerprint of a careless official. A diplomatic passport, said Monsieur Balk. We must be extremely careful, my friend, not to offend them. Besides, what could such people have to do with a murder? Do not worry, my old friend. I shall be the soul of tact. It is, after all, a mere formality. He lowered his voice as Madame Andrenyi entered the carriage. The lovely Countess was visibly nervous. You wish to see me, gentlemen? It is a pure formality, Countess. Poirot rose gallantly to meet her and gestured to the seat opposite. We only wish to ask if you saw or heard anything last night that might shed light on this murder? Absolutely nothing, monsieur. I was asleep. But surely you heard the commotion in the next compartment? The American lady, your neighbor, became quite hysterical and nearly broke the bell pull calling for the conductor. I heard nothing, monsieur. You see, I had taken a sedative. I understand. I will not detain you any longer. She rose quickly, but Poirot stopped her. One moment. Would you tell me if your name, maiden name, age, and so forth are correctly recorded here? Yes, monsieur. In that case, would you be so kind as to sign this statement? In a quick, graceful, sloping hand, she signed, Elena Andrenyi. Did you travel to America with your husband, madam? No, monsieur. She smiled and blushed slightly. We were not married then. We were wed only a year ago. Is that so? Thank you, madam. By the way, tell me, does your husband smoke? The Countess, she had already turned to leave, looked at Poirot in surprise. Yes. A pipe? No. Cigars and cigarettes. I see. Thank you. The Countess clearly hesitated. Her eyes, beautiful, dark, almond-shaped, with long black lashes that cast shadows over the ivory paleness of her cheeks, watched him closely. Her lips, painted a vivid red in the exotic foreign fashion, were slightly parted. There was something extraordinary, almost otherworldly, in the beauty of the young Countess. Why do you ask me that? Madam, Poirot said, with an elegant wave of his hand, detectives must ask all manner of questions. Here is another. For example, could you tell me the color of your dressing gown? The Countess looked at him with renewed astonishment. I have a dressing gown of corn-colored chiffon. Is that really so important? She laughed. Very important, madam. Tell me, are you truly a detective? Asked the Countess. Yes, madam. Your humble servant is a detective, and I thought that while we were traveling through Yugoslavia, there would be no police on the train. They usually appear only in Italy. I have no connection to the Yugoslavian police, madam. I am a detective of international standing. Do you serve the League of Nations, monsieur? I serve the world, madam. Poirot drew himself up. Mainly, I practice in London, he continued, and then asked, switching to English, Do you speak English? A little, she replied, with a charming accent. Poirot bowed once more. I will not detain you any longer, madam. As you see, it was not so very terrible. She smiled, nodded, and stepped out of the carriage. A beautiful woman, Monsieur Bouc remarked approvingly, with a sigh. However, that conversation gave us nothing. True, this couple saw nothing and heard nothing. But now, at last, we shall call the Italian. Poirot did not answer immediately. His attention was entirely absorbed by the greasy smudge on the Hungarian diplomat's passport. Chapter 8. The Evidence of Colonel Arbuthnot. Poirot shook his head and emerged from a deep reverie. His eyes, meeting the burning curiosity in Monsieur Bouc's gaze, twinkled with a mischievous light. My dear friend, he said, you see, I have become what one might call a snob, and therefore I believe we must deal with the first class first, and the second class later. So now, I think we shall invite the imposing colonel. After a few preliminary questions, it became clear that the colonel's knowledge of French was strictly limited, and Poirot switched to English. Having confirmed the colonel's name, surname, home address, and military rank, Poirot continued, Tell me, are you traveling home from India on leave, or, as we say, on permission? Colonel Arbuthnot showed not the slightest interest in how the despicable Frenchies termed things and replied with truly British brevity. Yes, but you did not use the ships of the Eastern Line? No. Why not? I prefer to travel by train for reasons of a personal nature. Take that! His whole manner seemed to say, That will teach you not to pester people, you impudent fellow. You travel from India without stopping anywhere? I stopped for one night in UR and for 3 days in Baghdad with an old friend. He is stationed there. The colonel replied dryly, You spent 3 days in Baghdad. As far as I know, this young Englishwoman, Miss Debenham, is also traveling from Baghdad. Did you not meet her there? No. I first met Miss Debenham on the way from Kirkuk to Nisibin. Poirot leaned toward his companion and, with deliberate foreign accent, said ingratiatingly, Monsieur, I wish to address a request to you. You and Miss Debenham are the only English people on the train. I find it necessary to know your opinion of one another. A most improper request, the colonel replied coldly. Not at all. You see, the crime was most likely committed by a woman. 12 stab wounds were found on the victim's body. Even the train conductor said immediately, This is the work of a woman. So what is my primary task? To find out everything possible about the female passengers in the Istanbul-Calais coach. English women are very difficult to understand. They are so reserved. Therefore, in the interest of justice, I turn to you for help, monsieur. Tell me, what do you think of Miss Debenham? What do you know of her? Miss Debenham, the colonel said with feeling, is a lady. Thank you, said Poirot, with an air as if everything had become clear to him. Then you consider it unlikely that she is involved in crime? An absolutely ridiculous suggestion, Arbuthnot replied. Miss Debenham was not acquainted with the victim. She saw him for the first time here, on the train. Did she tell you that? Yes. She noticed his unpleasant appearance at once, and shared that impression with me. If a woman is involved in the murder, which you assume, in my view, without any grounds and guided by mere conjecture, I can assure you that Miss Debenham has absolutely nothing to do with it. You seem very concerned about this. Poirot smiled. Colonel Arbuthnot measured him with a contemptuous look. I do not understand what you mean by that. Poirot appeared momentarily embarrassed. He lowered his eyes and began to shuffle his papers. "We have strayed from the point," he said. "Let us move to the facts. The crime, as we have reason to believe, occurred last night at 1:15. In the course of the investigation, we must interview all passengers on the train and find out what they were doing at that time." "Quite so. At 1:15, if my memory serves, I was talking to young American, the victim's secretary." "Is that so? Did you go to his compartment, or did he come to yours?" "I went to his." "You mean the young man by the name of McQueen?" "Yes. Is he a friend of yours, or just an acquaintance?" I had never seen him before. Yesterday we happened to exchange a few words and struck up a conversation. Generally speaking, I don't care much for Americans. As a rule, I find it difficult to find common ground with them. Poirot smiled, recalling McQueen's angry tirades against stuffy Britons. But this young man took my fancy at once. Although he has picked up some fool ideas about how to run things in India, that's the trouble with all Americans. They are idealists and sentimentalists to boot. He was interested in what I told him about India, for I spent nearly 30 years there, and I was interested in his accounts of the financial crisis in America. Then we passed on to the international situation. I was quite surprised when I looked at my watch and found it was already 1:15. "You finished your conversation at 1:15? "Yes." "What did you do then?" "Went to my compartment and turned in." "Your bed was already made up?" "Yes." "Your compartment is number 15, the last but one at the end of the coach opposite the dining car?" "Yes." "Where was the conductor when you were returning to your compartment?" "He was sitting at his little desk at the end of the passage. In fact, just as I was going in, McQueen called him." "What for?" "To make up his bed, I suppose. It hadn't been done when I was sitting with him. And now, Colonel, I want you to think back. While you were talking to McQueen, did anyone pass you in the corridor?" "A good many people, I should think, but I wasn't watching for them." "I am speaking of the last hour and a half. You got out at Vinkovci, did you not?" "Yes, but only for a minute. It was bitterly cold, with a blizzard blowing, so I was glad to get back into this hothouse. Though, personally, I think they keep the heating at an unpardonable level." Monsieur Book sighed. "One cannot please everyone," he said. "The English open all the windows. Others, on the contrary, close them. Yes, one cannot please everyone." Neither Poirot nor Arbuthnot paid the slightest attention to his remark. "And now, monsieur, try to let your mind travel back into the past," Poirot requested. "So, it is cold on the platform. You return to the train. You settle in the compartment and light a cigarette, or perhaps a pipe." Poirot paused. "I was smoking a pipe. McQueen had cigarettes. The train starts. You smoke your pipe, discussing the state of affairs in Europe, in the world. It is late. Almost everyone has gone to bed. Did anyone pass you? Think." Arbuthnot knit his brows. "It's hard to say," he said finally. "You see, I wasn't looking out for it. But you are a military man. You must possess a special power of observation. You surely notice many things, so to speak, without knowing you are noticing them." The colonel thought again and shook his head. "I can't say. I don't remember anyone passing, except the conductor. No, wait. I believe a woman passed." "Did you see her?" "What kind of woman? Young, old?" "I didn't see her. I wasn't looking in that direction. I just noticed a rustle and the scent of perfume." "Perfume. Good perfume?" "No, rather poor stuff, actually. The kind of scent that hits you from a distance, you know. But mind you," the colonel added hastily, "that might have been earlier. As you said yourself, one notices these things without realizing it. At some point during the evening, I noted to myself, a woman, and what perfume! But exactly when she passed, I couldn't say, though. Most likely it was after Vinkovci." "Why?" "I remember I caught the scent just as we began talking about the 5-year plan. You know how it is. The scent of perfume made me think of women. And from women, I skipped the position of women in Russia. And I remember we didn't get to Russia until near the end of our talk. Can you fix the time more accurately? No. Sometime toward the end of our conversation, perhaps half an hour before it finished. After the train had stopped? The colonel nodded. Yes, I am almost certain of that. Well, let's pass to another matter. Have you ever been to America, Colonel? Never, and I have no desire to go there. Were you acquainted with Colonel Armstrong? Armstrong. I knew 2 or 3 Armstrongs. There was Tommy Armstrong in the 60th. You're not asking about him? Then I knew Selby Armstrong. He was killed on the Somme. I am asking about the Colonel Armstrong, who married an American, the one whose daughter was kidnapped and murdered. Ah, I remember reading about it in the papers. A monstrous crime. No, I didn't know him. Though, of course, I've heard of him. Toby Armstrong. A fine fellow. Everybody liked him. Had a brilliant record. Awarded the Victoria Cross. The man who was killed last night was responsible for the death of the Armstrong child. Arbuthnot's face grew stern. Then I consider the scoundrel got what he deserved. Though, personally, I should have preferred him to be hanged after a proper trial. They use the electric chair in America, don't they? Consequently, Colonel Arbuthnot, you are for justice and against private vengeance? Most certainly. We can't have people taking the law into their own hands or sticking daggers into each other like Corsicans or the Mafia, said the colonel. Say what you like, but the jury system is a very sound one. Poirot looked at the colonel thoughtfully for a minute or two. Yes, he said, I thought you would hold that view. Well, Colonel, I have no more questions. Tell me, do you remember anything else? Anything that seemed suspicious last night, or perhaps seems suspicious now in retrospect? Even the smallest trifle? Colonel Arbuthnot considered. No, nothing, except perhaps. He hesitated. Please, go on, I beg of you. It is absolute nonsense, the colonel said reluctantly. But since you mention it, even the smallest trifle. Yes, go on. No, really it is a mere nothing. Since you are so interested in trifles, I will tell you. As I was returned to my own compartment, I noticed at the door of the one next to mine, the last door in the corridor, I know, the door compartment number 16. Well, that door was not quite closed, and through the crack, a man was peeking out stealthily. As soon as he saw me, he slammed the door shut. Of course, it's absolute nonsense, but it surprised me. I mean, everyone opens a door and sticks their head out when they want to look into the corridor, but he did it surreptitiously, as if he didn't want to be seen. That is why I took notice of him. Poirot said doubtfully. I told you it was absolute nonsense, Arbuthnot said, sounding embarrassed. But the early morning, the silence, it felt like something sinister, a regular scene from a detective novel. However, it's all rubbish. He stood up. Well, if you don't need me any further, thank you, Colonel. That will be all. The colonel did not leave immediately. He had clearly ceased to be angry with the pitiful Frenchman who had dared to cross-examine a Briton. Now, as regarding Miss Debenham, he said awkwardly, you can take my word for it. She has nothing to do with this. She is Pukka Sahib. The colonel flushed and left. What does Pukka Sahib mean? Dr. Constantine asked curiously. It means, Poirot explained, that Miss Debenham's father and brothers attended the same schools as the colonel. Is that all? Dr. Constantine was clearly disappointed. So it has nothing to do with the crime? Not the slightest, said Poirot. He became lost in thought, his hand mechanically tapping the table. Colonel Arbuthnot smokes a pipe, he suddenly burst out. In Ratchett's compartment, I found a pipe cleaner, and Mr. Ratchett smoked only cigars. And you think, so far, he is the only one who has admitted to smoking a pipe, and he knew Colonel Armstrong by reputation. It is not impossible that he knew him personally, though he denies it. Then you think it possible. Poirot shook his head. No, no, it is impossible, quite impossible, that a law-abiding, slightly slow-witted, straightforward Englishman should plunge a knife 12 times in succession into his enemy. Do you not feel, my friend, how improbable that is? Those are all psychological tricks, said Monsieur Book. Psychology must be respected. Our crime has its own signature, and it is in no way the signature of Colonel Arbuthnot. And now, said Poirot, let's examine the next witness. This time Monsieur Book did not name the Italian, but it was the Italian he wanted to be called. Chapter 9, The Evidence of Mr. Hardman. The last of the first-class passengers to be summoned was Mr. Hardman, a big, flamboyant American with bright red hair, who had been sharing a table with the Italian and the valet. He entered the dining car, rolling a piece of chewing gum around in his mouth. He wore a loud check suit and a pink shirt, with large, glittering pins stuck in his tie. His face was large, fleshy, and coarse-featured, but bore a pleasant and good-natured expression. "Hello, gentlemen," he said. "What can I do for you? You have already heard of the murder, Mr. Hardman." "Sure." He deftly shifted his gum to the other cheek. "And so, we are interviewing all the passengers. That's quite all right with me. I guess it's the only way to go about it." Poirot looked at the passport lying before him. "You are Cyrus Bethman Hardman, a United States citizen, 41 years of age, a traveling salesman for a firm selling typewriter ribbons?" "That's me, all right." "You are traveling from Istanbul to Paris?" "That's right." "The purpose of your journey?" "Business." "Do you always travel first class, Mr. Hardman?" "Yes, sir." The American winked. "The firm pays my traveling expenses. And now, Mr. Hardman, let us come to the events of last night." The American nodded. "What can you tell us about them?" "Absolutely nothing." "That is a pity. But perhaps you can tell us, Mr. Hardman, what you were doing yesterday afternoon." For the first time, the American seemed at a loss for an answer. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said after a pause, "but who are you exactly? Put me wise to the situation." "This is Monsieur Book, a director of the Company Internationale de Wagenslits. This gentleman is the doctor who examined the body. And you?" "I am Hercule Poirot. I have been requested by the company to investigate this murder." "I've heard of you," said Mr. Hardman. He hesitated for a minute, or perhaps two. "I guess I'd better come clean." "It would certainly be very wise of you to tell us all you know," Poirot said dryly. "I'd tell you plenty if I knew anything. I don't know a thing, not a single thing, like I told you already. And the point is, I ought to know. That's what gets me. I'm the one who should have known everything. Please explain yourself, Mr. Hardman." Mr. Hardman sighed, spat out his gum, and tucked it into his pocket. At that moment, his entire personality seemed to change. The vaudeville-style American vanished, and a shrewd, alert man took his place. Even his nasal accent became less pronounced. "That passport is a fake," he said. "This is who I really am." He flicked a business card across the table. Poirot studied the card for some time, while Monsieur Book leaned over his shoulder with great impatience. "M.R. Cyrus B. Hardman McNeil's Detective Agency, New York." Poirot was well aware of McNeil's agency, one of the most famous and highly respected private detective firms in New York. "And now, Mr. Hardman," he said, "tell us exactly what this means." "Right. Here's how it went. I came over to Europe trailing a couple of swindlers. Nothing to do with this case at all. The chase ended in Istanbul. I wired my chief, got my orders to head back, and was just about to start for New York when I got this." He handed over a letter written on the stationery of the Tokit Lin Hotel. "Dear Sir, I have been informed that you are a representative of the McNeil Detective Agency. Please call at my room at 4 o'clock this afternoon." It was signed, S.E. Ratchet. And then I showed up at the appointed time, and Mr. Ratchet opened up about his fears. He showed me a couple of those threatening letters he'd been getting. Was he alarmed? He tried to play it cool, but if you ask me, he was scared to death. He offered to pay my way to Paris on this very train to keep an eye on him. so he wouldn't get bumped off. And here I am, gentlemen. I came along, and despite it all, he got bumped off anyway. It's tough. A real black mark on my reputation. Did he give you any specific instructions? Sure did. He had it all figured out. He wanted me to have a compartment right next to his. But that didn't pan out. I could only get number 16, and even that took some doing. I think the conductor was trying to hold on to it for someone else. But anyway, looking things over, I decided number 16 was a great vantage point. Ahead of the Istanbul sleeper, there's only the dining car. The front door to the platform is bolted at night. So if anyone wanted to get into the car, they'd have to come through the rear door or through the other coaches. Either way, they'd have to pass me. Do you happen to know anything about the identity of Mr. Ratchet's enemy? Well, I knew what he looked like. Mr. Ratchet described him to me. What? The three men asked in unison. According to the old man, Hardman continued, it was a small man, dark complexioned, with a high-pitched, womanish voice. He also said he didn't think the guy would strike on the first night, more likely the second or third. So he knew something after all, said Monsieur Book. He certainly knew more than he told his secretary. Poirot mused. Did he tell you anything else about this man? For instance, why he was threatening his life? No, he kept mum about that. Just said the guy was after him and meant to finish him, no matter what. A small man, dark, with a high-pitched voice, Poirot repeated thoughtfully, fixing a searching gaze on Hardman. Of course you knew who he really was. Who, mister? Ratchet. You recognize him? I don't follow you. Ratchet was Cassetti, the man who murdered the Armstrong child. Mr. Hardman gave a long, low whistle. Well, I'll be... You've knocked me over. No, I didn't recognize him. I was out west when the trial was on. I'd seen his pictures in the papers, of course, but you can't recognize your own mother from those newsprint blurs. I don't doubt there were plenty of people who wanted to settle a score with Cassetti. Do you know of anyone connected to the Armstrong case who fits that description? Small, dark, with a high-pitched voice? Hardman thought for a moment or two. Hard to say. Most of the folks involved in that case are dead now. Do you remember the girl who threw herself out the window? Sure. Now you're talking. She was a foreigner, so maybe she had some Italian relatives. But don't forget, Ratchet had other jobs on his record besides the Armstrong kid. He'd been in the kidnapping business for quite a while. We shouldn't just focus on that one case. We have reason to believe this crime is connected to the Armstrong affair. Mr. Hardman narrowed his eyes questioningly. Poirot remained silent. The American shook his head. No, I can't say I recall anyone like that, he said at last. But keep in mind, I wasn't on that case myself, and I don't know much about it. Very well. Please continue, Mr. Hardman. There isn't much more to tell. I slept during the day and stayed awake at night. The first night, nothing suspicious happened. Last night was the same, or so it seemed to me. I kept my door ajar and watched the corridor. No stranger passed by. Are you sure of that, Mr. Hardman? Positive. No one came into the car from the outside, and no one came through from the rear coaches. I'd stake my life on it. And from your position, could you see the conductor? Sure. His little seat is almost right against my door. Did he leave his post after Vinkovci? Was that the last stop? Well, let's see. He was called away a couple times right after the train got stuck. Then he went into the Athens coach and stayed there for maybe 15 minutes. But then someone started ringing like crazy, and he came running back. I stepped out to see what the fuss was. I was a bit on edge myself, you understand, but it turned out to be that American lady. She was raising a real stink with the conductor. Though I don't know what about. I had a laugh and went back inside. Later, the conductor went to another compartment to bring someone a bottle of mineral water. Then he sat on his seat and stayed there until he was called to the far end of the car to make up a bed. After that, he didn't move until 5 in the morning. Was he asleep? Couldn't say. He might have been dozing. Poirot nodded. His hands mechanically straightened the papers on the table into neat piles. He picked up the business card once more. "Would you be so kind as to initial this?" he requested. Hardman signed it. "I suppose there is no one on the train who can confirm your story and vouch for your identity, Mr. Hardman? On the train? I guess not, unless it's young McQueen. I remember that lad well. Saw him often in his father's office in New York. But I doubt he'd pick me out from all the other dicks he's seen. No, Mr. Poirot, you'll just have to wait until we get through these snowdrifts and wire New York. But don't you worry, I'm giving it to you straight. See you later, gentlemen. Glad to have met you, Mr. Poirot." Poirot held out his cigarette case to Hardman. "But perhaps you prefer a pipe?" "No, a pipe isn't really our style." He took a cigarette and made a quick exit. The men exchanged glances. "Do you believe he is truly a detective?" asked Dr. Constantine. "Undoubtedly. He is a quintessential detective. I have seen many of his kind in my time. Besides, a story like that is very easy to verify." "Most interesting evidence," said Monsieur Book. "Indeed." A small man, dark complexion, with a high-pitched voice, Monsieur Book repeated thoughtfully. "A description," said Poirot, "that fits no one on this train." Chapter 10. The Evidence of the Italian. "And now," Poirot said with a sly smile, "let us please Monsieur Book and summon the Italian." Antonio Foscarelli entered the dining car with a tread as soft and noiseless as a cat's. His face was beaming. It was a typical face of an Italian, swarthy and high-spirited. He spoke French fluently and correctly, with only a very slight accent. "Your name is Antonio Foscarelli?" "Yes, monsieur." "I see that you have become an American citizen?" "Yes, monsieur. It is better for my business," the Italian said with a grin. "You are an agent for Ford Automobiles?" "Yes, you see." And then followed a long-winded speech. By the end of it, everyone present knew in minute detail everything about Foscarelli's business methods, his travels, his income, and his opinions on America and most of Europe. One did not have to draw information out of this Italian. It poured forth in a mighty stream. His simple face shone with pleasure when he finally stopped and wiped his forehead with a handkerchief in a dramatic gesture. "Now, you see," he said, "I do big business. Everything I do is modern. If anyone knows the secrets of trade, it is I. So, in the last 10 years, you have been to the United States frequently?" "Yes, monsieur. I remember as if it were today the day I first stepped onto that ship. I was going far away, to America. My mother and my little sister—" Poirot interrupted the flow of memories. "During your stay in the United States, did you ever meet the deceased?" "Never, but I know his kind well." "Oh, yes, very well." He snapped his fingers expressively. "On the outside, they are all respectability, dressed to the nines, but it is all for show. My experience tells me that the murdered man was a true criminal. Believe it or not, but it is so." "You are not mistaken," Poirot said dryly. "The name Ratchet was a cover for Cassetti, the notorious kidnapper of children. What did I tell you? In our business, you must be able to tell who you are dealing with at a single glance. Without that, you cannot succeed. Yes, only in America is trade truly organized. Do you remember the Armstrong case?" "Not quite, although the name sounds familiar. It was about a girl, a very little one, was it not?" "Yes, a tragic story." The Italian, unlike the others, did not seem to share this somber view. "Oh, such things happen all the time," he said philosophically. "In a country of great civilization, such as America—" Poirot cut him off. "Did you ever meet any members of the Armstrong family?" "No, I do not think so. But who knows? Let me give you some figures. Why, just last year I sold—" "Monsieur, please, let us stick to the point." The Italian raised his hands imploringly. "1,000 pardons. Now, tell me as accurately as possible what you did yesterday evening after dinner." "With pleasure. I stayed here in the restaurant as long as I could. It is more cheerful here. I talked to the American, my table neighbor, He sells typewriter ribbons. Then I returned to my compartment. It was empty. That miserable John Bull, my neighbor, was attending to his master. Finally, he returned, as gloomy as ever. He would not talk. He only grunted yes and no. An unpleasant nation, the English, so unsociable. He just sat in the corner, as stiff as if he had swallowed a poker, reading a book. Then the conductor came and made up our beds. Berths 4 and 5, Poirot murmured. Exactly, the last compartment. Mine was the upper berth. I climbed up, read, and smoked. That little scrap of an Englishman seemed to have a toothache. He took out a bottle of some foul-smelling medicine. He lay on his berth, groaning. Soon I fell asleep, and whenever I woke up, I could hear the Englishman still moaning. Do you know if he left the compartment during the night? No. I would have heard him. When the door opens, light from the corridor spills in. One always thinks it is a customs inspection at the border and wakes up automatically. Did he speak to you about his master? Did he complain? I already told you. He did not speak to me about anything. A sullen fellow. It was as if he had water in his mouth. What do you smoke? A pipe, cigarettes, or cigars? Only cigarettes. The Italian took a cigarette offered by Poirot. Have you ever been to Chicago? Monsieur Book asked. I have. It is a fine city. But I know New York, Washington, and Detroit better. Have you been to America? No. You must go. It is such a... Poirot handed Foscarelli a sheet of paper. Please sign this and write down your permanent address. The Italian signed his name, embellishing it with many luxurious flourishes. Then, still smiling infectiously, he stood up. Is that all? You do not need me any more? Good day to you, gentlemen. I hope we get out of these snowdrifts soon. I have a business meeting in Milan. He shook his head sadly. I shall most likely lose a deal. Poirot looked at his friend. Foscarelli lived in America for a long time, Monsieur Book remarked. And besides, he is an Italian, and Italians always reach for a knife. Furthermore, they are all liars. I do not like Italians. C'est voit, Poirot smiled. Well, perhaps you are right, my friend, but I must remind you that we have no evidence against this man. And what about your psychology? Do Italians not reach for a knife? They certainly do, Poirot agreed, especially in the heat of a quarrel. But we are dealing with a crime of a very different sort. I believe it was premeditated and carefully devised. There is a long-term plan behind it. And above all, it is, how shall I put it, a crime uncharacteristic of a Latin. It speaks of a cold, inventive, and calculating mind more typical, I think, of an Anglo-Saxon. He took the last 2 passports from the table. And now, he said, let us call Miss Mary Debenham. Chapter 11. The Evidence of Miss Debenham. Mary Debenham entered the restaurant car. Poirot once again realized that his initial assessment of her had been correct. She wore a black suit and a mauve-gray blouse. Her hair was perfectly styled, not a single strand out of place. Her movements were just as deliberate and composed as her hairstyle. She sat down opposite Poirot and Monsieur Book and looked at them with an air of inquiry. Your name is Mary Hermione Debenham, and you are 26 years old? Poirot began the interrogation. Yes. You are English? Yes. Would you be so kind, mademoiselle, as to write your permanent address on this piece of paper? She wrote a few words in a neat, legible hand. And now, mademoiselle, what can you tell us about the events of last night? I am afraid I have nothing to tell you. I went to bed and fell asleep immediately. Does it distress you greatly, mademoiselle, that a crime has been committed on this train? The girl clearly had not expected such a question. Her pupils widened almost imperceptibly. I do not understand you. And yet it is a very simple question, mademoiselle. I shall repeat it. Are you distressed by the fact that a crime has been committed on our train? I haven't really thought about it in that way. No, I cannot say that it has distressed me. So, to you, there is nothing extraordinary about a murder? Naturally. Such an occurrence is most unpleasant, Mary Debenham replied with composure. You are a typical Englishwoman, mademoiselle. You do not display your emotions." She smiled. "I am afraid I cannot go into hysterics just to prove to you how sensitive I am. Besides, people die every day." "They die, yes, but murder is somewhat less common." "Of course. Were you acquainted with the deceased?" "I saw him for the first time yesterday at breakfast." "What was your impression of him?" "I hardly noticed him." "Did he not strike you as an evil man?" She gave a slight shrug of her shoulders. "Really, I gave him no thought." Poirot looked at her keenly. "It seems to me that you slightly despise my methods of investigation." A shrewd light flickered in his eyes. "You think that an Englishman would conduct the inquiry differently. He would cut out all the non-essentials and stick strictly to the facts. In a word, he would be methodical and organized. But I, mademoiselle, have my own little whims. First and foremost, I observe the witness, I determine their character, and I frame my questions accordingly. A few minutes ago, I was questioning a gentleman who was eager to offer his views on every possible subject. To him, I allowed no straying. I demanded only yes and no. Then comes you. I see at once that you are a person of order and method. You will not wander. You will answer briefly and to the point. And since there is a spirit of contradiction in all of us, I ask you entirely different questions. I ask you what you feel, what you think. You do not like this method? If you will excuse my frankness, it seems like a waste of time to me. Suppose you discover whether I like Mr. Ratchet's face or not. It is hardly going to help you find the murderer. Do you know who Ratchet really was?" She nodded. "Mrs. Hubbard has already informed everyone." "What is your opinion of the Armstrong case?" "It was a monstrous crime." Poirot looked at the girl thoughtfully. "Miss Debenham, as far as I know, you are traveling from Baghdad?" "Yes." "To London?" "Yes." "What were you doing in Baghdad?" "I was acting as a governess to a family with 2 small children." "Will you return to that post after your holiday?" "I am not sure." "Why is that?" "Baghdad is a long way off." "I should prefer to live in London, if I can find a suitable vacancy." "I see. I had thought perhaps you were going to be married." Miss Debenham did not answer. She raised her eyes and looked Poirot full in the face. Her gaze said, "You are being impertinent. What do you think of your cabin mate, Miss Olson? A nice, simple-minded woman. What color is her dressing gown?" "A brown woolen one." A flash of surprise showed in Miss Debenham's eyes. I must mention, and I hope you will not find me indiscreet, that on the way from Aleppo to Istanbul, I noticed your own dressing gown. It is mauve, is it not?" "You are quite right. Do you not have another dressing gown with you, mademoiselle? A red one, perhaps?" "No, that is not my dressing gown." Poirot leaned forward quickly, like a cat sighting a mouse. "Whose is it, then?" The girl, clearly startled, drew back. "I don't understand what you mean. You did not say, 'I do not have such a gown.' You said, 'That is not mine,' which implies that such a gown exists, but it belongs to someone else." She nodded. "Someone on the train?" "Yes." "Whose is it?" "I have just told you. I do not know. This morning, around 5 o'clock, I woke up with the feeling that the train had been standing still for a long time. I opened my door and looked out into the corridor to see what station we were at, and then I saw a figure in a red kimono moving away from me down the corridor. You do not know who it was? What color was the woman's hair? Fair, dark, or gray?" "I couldn't say." "She was wearing a sleeping cap, and besides, I only saw the back of her head." "And what was her figure like?" "Fairly tall and slim, as far as I could judge." "The kimono was embroidered with dragons." "Quite so." Poirot remained silent for a minute. Then he muttered to himself, "I do not understand. I do not understand it at all. Nothing fits together." He looked up and said, "I will not detain you any longer, mademoiselle." "Is that all?" She was clearly surprised, but she rose quickly. At the door, however, she hesitated and turned back. "That Swedish lady, Miss Olson, is it? She is very distressed. She says you told her that she was the last person to see that man alive. She probably thinks you suspect her. May I tell her that she has no need to worry?" Miss Olson is a most harmless creature. She wouldn't hurt a fly. A faint smile played on Miss Debenham's lips. When did Miss Olson go to fetch the aspirin from Mrs. Hubbard? At 10:30. How long was she away? About 5 minutes. Did she leave the compartment during the night? No. Poirot turned to the doctor. Could Ratchet have been killed that early? The doctor shook his head. Well, then, I think you may reassure your friend, mademoiselle. Thank you. She suddenly gave a surprisingly winning smile. You know, that Swedish woman is very like a sheep. The slightest thing, and she loses her head and bleats. Miss Debenham turned and left the car. Chapter 12. The Evidence of the Lady's Maid. Monsieur Book looked at his friend with curiosity. I do not quite understand you, mon vieux. What were you aiming at? I was looking for a flaw, my friend. A flaw? Yes, a crack in the armor of self-possession in which that young lady has encased herself. I wish to shake her composure. Did I succeed? I do not know. But one thing I know for certain. She did not expect me to use such a method. You suspect her, Monsieur Book said thoughtfully. But why? To my mind, that charming young woman could not possibly be involved in such a crime. I quite agree, said Dr. Constantine. She is very cool-headed. I believe she would not fly at an enemy with a knife. She would simply sue him in a court of law. Poirot sighed. You both have a fixed idea that this was an unpremeditated, impulsive murder, and you must rid yourselves of it as soon as possible. As for my suspicions regarding Miss Debenham, there are 2 reasons. The first is a conversation I happened to overhear, one I have not yet told you about. He then recounted the curious exchange he had caught while traveling from Aleppo. Very curious, Monsieur Book remarked when Poirot fell silent. But it still requires interpretation. If it means what you suspect, then both she and that stiff Englishman are implicated in the murder. But that, said Poirot, is not supported by the facts. You see, if they were both in it together, what would follow? They would try to provide each other with an alibi. Is that not so? Yet, that is not what is happening. Miss Debenham's alibi is supported by the Swedish lady, whom she had never seen before, and the Colonel's alibi is provided by Mr. McQueen, the victim's secretary. No, your solution is far too simple for such a puzzle. You said you had another reason for suspecting her, Monsieur Book reminded him. Poirot smiled. It is, once again, a matter of pure psychology. I asked myself, could Miss Debenham have conceived such a crime? I am convinced that this business involved a cold and resourceful brain, and Miss Debenham gives exactly that impression. Monsieur Book shook his head. I think you are mistaken, my friend. I cannot imagine that young Englishwoman committing a crime. Well, said Poirot, picking up the remaining passport. Now let us move to the last name on our list. Hildegard Schmidt, the lady's maid. Summoned by the attendant. She soon entered the restaurant car and stood respectfully near the door. Poirot motioned for her to sit. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and prepared herself calmly to answer questions. She gave the impression of a woman who was exceedingly phlegmatic and highly respectable, though perhaps not particularly bright. With Hildegard Schmidt, Poirot's manner was entirely different than it had been with Mary Debenham. He was all gentleness and kindness. He clearly wished to make the maid feel at ease. After asking her to write down her name, surname, and address, Poirot transitioned smoothly into the interrogation. The conversation was conducted in German. We wish to learn as much as possible about the events of last night, he said. We know that you cannot tell us anything about the crime itself, but you may have heard or seen something to which you attached no importance, but which could be of great value to us. Do you understand? It was clear she did not understand. I know nothing, monsieur, she replied, with the same expression of dull tranquility on her broad, kindly face. Well, then, let us take, for example, this fact. Do you remember that your mistress sent for you last night? Of course, I remember. Do you remember what time it was? No, monsieur. I was asleep when the conductor came for me. I see. Was it unusual for you to be sent for at night? No, monsieur. The lady often requires my services during the night. She does not sleep well. Excellent. So, you were told that the princess wanted you, and you got up. Tell me, did you put on a dressing gown? No, monsieur. I dressed properly. I would never have dared to appear before Her Highness the Princess in a dressing gown. And yet, you have a very beautiful red dressing gown, do you not? She stared at Poirot in surprise. I have a dark blue flannel dressing gown, monsieur. Ah, I see. Please go on. I was only joking. So, you went to the princess. What did you do for her? I gave Madame a massage, and then I read to her aloud. I do not read very well, but her ladyship says that is even better. It helps her fall asleep faster. When Madame began to doze off, she dismissed me. I closed the book and returned to my own compartment. And what time was that? Do you remember? No, monsieur. Tell me, then, how long were you with the princess? About half an hour, monsieur. Very good. Please continue. First, I fetched another rug from my compartment for Madame. It was very cold. Even though the heating was on, I covered her with a rug, and she wished me good night. I poured her some mineral water, turned out the light, and left. And then, there is nothing more to tell, monsieur. I went back to my compartment and went to sleep. Did you meet anyone in the corridor? No, monsieur. You did not happen to meet, shall we say, a lady in a red kimono embroidered with dragons? The German woman opened her mild blue eyes wide. Oh, no, monsieur. There was only the conductor in the corridor. Everyone else had been asleep for a long time. But you did see a conductor? Yes, monsieur. What was he doing? He was coming out of a compartment, monsieur. What? Monsieur Book broke in, leaning toward the maid. Which compartment? Hildegard Schmidt looked startled again, and Poirot shot a reproachful glance at his friend. There is nothing unusual in that, he said smoothly. A conductor must often attend to calls during the night. Do you remember which compartment he came out of? It was somewhere in the middle of the coach, monsieur. 2 or 3 doors down from the princess's compartment. I see. Tell us exactly how it happened. He nearly ran into me, monsieur. It was when I was returning from my compartment with the rug for the princess. So, he stepped out of compartment and almost collided with you? In which direction was he going? Toward me, monsieur. He apologized and passed down the corridor toward the restaurant car. Just then, a bell rang, but I do not think he answered the call. She paused for a moment and added, But I do not understand. How could it be? Poirot hurried to reassure her. We are merely checking the times, madam. It is a pure formality. The poor conductor must have had a difficult night. First waking you, then all those calls. But it was not that conductor, monsieur. The one who woke me was a different man altogether. Ah, so it was another one? Had you seen him before? No, monsieur. I see. Would you recognize him if you saw him again? I think so, monsieur. Poirot whispered something into Monsieur Book's ear. Book rose and went to the door to give an order. Poirot continued the questioning in the same friendly, easy manner. Have you ever been to America, Frau Schmidt? No, monsieur. I have been told it is a wonderful country. You have likely heard who the victim really was. That he was responsible for the death of a child? Yes, monsieur, I heard. It is a monstrous crime, a terrible sin. How God permits such things, I do not know. In Germany, such things do not happen. Tears welled up in her eyes. Yes, it is a monstrous crime, Poirot repeated. He pulled a scrap of fine cambric from his pocket and showed it to the maid. Is this your handkerchief, Frau Schmidt? Silence fell as the woman examined the handkerchief. After a minute, she looked up, her cheeks flushing. Oh, no, monsieur. That is not my handkerchief. You see, it has the initial H on it. That is why I thought it might be yours, since your name is Hildegard. Ah, monsieur, such handkerchiefs belong only to wealthy ladies. They cost a great deal of money. It is hand-embroidered, most likely from a Parisian workshop. So it is not your handkerchief, and you do not know whose it is? Oh no, monsieur. Of everyone present. Only Poirot caught the slight hesitation in her voice. Monsieur Book whispered something urgently into his ear. Poirot nodded. 3 sleeping car conductors are about to come in, he told the woman. Would you be so kind as to tell us if any of them is the man you met last night while carrying the rug to the princess? 3 men entered. Pierre Michel, the tall blonde conductor of the Athens-Paris coach, and the sturdy, thick-set conductor of the Bucharest coach. Hildegard Schmidt looked at them closely and shook her head decisively. The man I saw last night is not here, monsieur, she said. But there are no other conductors on the train. You must be mistaken. I could not be mistaken, monsieur. These conductors are all tall, large men. The one I saw was short, dark, with a small mustache. As he passed me, he apologized, and his voice was high-pitched, like a woman's. I saw him very clearly, monsieur, I assure you. Chapter 13. Poirot propounds a theory. A small, dark man with a high-pitched voice, said Monsieur Book. The 3 conductors and Hildegard Schmidt had been dismissed. Monsieur Book threw out his arms in a gesture of despair. I understand nothing, absolutely nothing. Does it mean that this enemy of Ratchet's, the one he spoke of, was actually on the train? And where is he now? He could not have simply vanished into thin air. My head is spinning. Say something, I beg of you. Explain to me how the impossible has become possible. A very good way of putting it, said Poirot. The impossible cannot have happened. Therefore the impossible must be possible in spite of appearances. Then explain to me quickly what happened on the train last night. I am not a magician, my dear friend. I am just as puzzled as you are. This case is proceeding in a very strange manner. It is not proceeding at all. It is standing still. Poirot shook his head. That is not true. We have advanced a little. We know certain things. We have heard the evidence of the passengers. And what has that given us? Nothing. I would not say that, my friend. Perhaps I exaggerate. Of course, this American Hardman and the Maid have added some information to what we already know. Or rather, they confuse the matter even further. Do not despair. Poirot calmed him. Monsieur Book turned on him. Then speak. Share with us the wisdom of Hercule Poirot. Did I not tell you that I am as puzzled as you? But now we can begin to resolve the problem. We can arrange the facts we have in order and deal with them methodically. I beg you, monsieur, continue, requested Dr. Constantine. Poirot cleared his throat and smoothed a piece of blotting paper. Let us examine what we have. First of all, we know certain undeniable facts. Ratchet or Cassetti received 12 knife wounds last night and died. That is fact number 1. I do not dare to argue. Oh, friend, I do not dare to argue, said Monsieur Book, not without irony. Poirot was not at all discouraged. I will pass over for now the rather unusual circumstances that Dr. Constantine and I have already discussed together, he continued calmly. I will return to them in due course. The next fact of importance, it seems to me, is the time the crime was committed. Again, one of the few things we know, interrupted Monsieur Book. The crime was committed at 1:15 this morning. Everything points to that being the case. Not everything. You exaggerate. Though, of course, we have a considerable number of facts supporting that view. I am glad to hear you admit at least that much. Poirot continued unperturbed, as if he had not been interrupted. 3 assumptions are possible. First, the crime was committed, as you say, at 1:15. This is supported by the broken watch, the evidence of Mistress Hubbard, and the maid Hildegard Schmidt. Moreover, it coincides with the findings of Dr. Constantine. Second assumption, the murder was committed later, and the hands of the watch were moved to confuse us. Third, the crime was committed earlier, and the hands were moved for the same reason as above. Now, if we accept the first assumption as the most probable and supported by the greatest number of witnesses, we must consider certain facts arising from it. To begin with, If the crime was committed at 1:15, the murderer could not have left the train. Therefore, the question arises, where is the murderer, and who is he? First, let us carefully examine all the testimony. We first heard of the existence of a small, dark man with a high-pitched voice from Hardman. He claims that Ratchet told him about this man and hired him for protection. We have no facts to confirm this testimony, and therefore we must take Hardman's word for it. Now let us look at the second question. Is Hardman the man he claims to be? Is he really an agent from a New York detective agency? In my opinion, this case is interesting primarily because we are deprived of all the technical aids that the police usually employ. We cannot verify the testimony of witnesses. We must rely entirely on our own deductions. For me personally, this makes solving the crime even more interesting. No routine, only the work of the mind. And so, I ask myself, can we believe Hardman's testimony when he speaks about himself? And I decide, yes, we can. I am of the opinion that we can believe what Hardman tells us about himself. Are you relying on your intuition? Asked Dr. Constantine. Or, as the Americans say, on your hunch? Not at all. I am exploring all possibilities. Hardman is traveling with a false passport, which means that in any case, suspicion would fall on him first. As soon as the police arrive, they will immediately detain Hardman and cable New York to check his story. Verifying the identity of most passengers is very difficult. And in most cases, it would not be done simply because they give no cause for suspicion. In Hardman's case, it is different. He is either who he says he is, or he is not. That is why I believe everything here must be in order. You consider him free of suspicion, then? Not at all. You have misunderstood me. How do I know? Any American detective might have his own reasons for killing Ratchet. I only want to say that Hardman can be believed when he talks about his identity. Ratchet could well have hired him, and in all probability, though one cannot be certain, that is what happened. If we take Hardman's testimony on faith, then we must look for further confirmation, and we find it quite unexpectedly in the evidence of Hildegard Schmidt. The sleeping car conductor she met in the corridor is exactly like the enemy of Ratchet described by Hardman. Can we confirm these two accounts? We have the button that Mistress Hubbard found in her compartment. And there is one more piece of evidence, although you might not have noticed it. What is that? Both Colonel Arbuthnot and Hector McQueen mentioned that a conductor passed by their compartment. They did not attach any importance to it. But remember, gentlemen, Pierre Michel stated that he did not leave his seat, except for the cases he specifically mentioned, and in none of those cases did he need to pass the compartment where Arbuthnot and McQueen were sitting. Consequently, the story of a small, dark man with a high-pitched voice in the uniform of a sleeping car conductor is supported by the testimony of 4 witnesses, directly or indirectly. And one more small detail, said Dr. Constantine. If Hildegard Schmidt is telling the truth, then why did the Real conductor not mention seeing her when he went to answer Mistress Hubbard's call? That, I think, is easily explained. When he went to Mistress Hubbard, the maid was with her mistress, and when the maid was returning to her own compartment, the conductor was inside Mistress Hubbard's compartment. Monsieur Book could hardly wait for the end of the sentence. Yes, my friend, he said impatiently. While I admire your caution and the way you proceed methodically, step by step, toward the goal, I still dare to point out that you have not touched upon the main point. We all agree that this man exists. But where did he go? That is the question. Poirot shook his head disapprovingly. You are mistaken. You are putting the cart before the horse. Before asking myself, where did this man disappear to, I ask myself, does such a man actually exist? And do you know why? Because if this man did not exist, if he were simply made up, invented, how much easier it would be for him to vanish. Therefore, I first endeavor to learn if such a person exists in the flesh. Well, and now that you have established that he exists, tell me, where is he? There are 2 answers to that, my friend. Either he is hiding on the train in such an unexpected place that it does not even occur to us to look for him there, Or he exists, so to speak, in two faces. That is to say, he is simultaneously the person Mr. Ratchet feared and one of the passengers on the train, so well disguised that Ratchet did not recognize him. A brilliant thought, Monsieur Book beamed. However, his face immediately darkened again. But there is one discrepancy. Poirot anticipated his words. The height of this man, is that what you meant to say? With the exception of Mr. Ratchet's valet, all the male passengers, the Italian, Colonel Arbuthnot, Hector McQueen, Count Andrenyi, are tall. That leaves us only with the valet, who is not a very suitable candidate. But here another suggestion arises. Remember the high-pitched voice, like a woman's. This gives us a choice. It could be a man disguised as a woman or a woman. If you dress a tall woman in a man's suit, she appears small. But surely Ratchet would have known. Monsieur Book objected. Quite likely he did know. It is entirely possible that this woman had already made an attempt on his life, disguised as a man for that purpose. Ratchet might have guessed she would resort to this trick again, and therefore told Hardman to watch out for a man. However, just in case, he mentioned the high-pitched, womanish voice. It is possible, said Monsieur Book. And yet, listen, my friend, I think it is time to tell you about certain discrepancies noticed by Dr. Constantine. And Poirot told Monsieur Book in detail about the conclusions he and the doctor had reached while analyzing the nature of the wounds. Monsieur Book groaned and clutched his head. I understand, Poirot said sympathetically. I understand you perfectly. Your head is spinning, is it not? But this is a nightmare, cried Monsieur Book. Precisely. It is absurd, incredible, and simply impossible. I say the same thing. And yet, my friend, it is so. One cannot escape the facts. But it is madness. Exactly. The whole thing is so incredible, my friend, that I am sometimes haunted by the thought that the solution must be perfectly simple. However, that is only an intuition, so to speak. 2 murderers, groaned Monsieur Book, on the Orient Express. He was almost in tears. And now, said Poirot brightly, let us give rein to our imagination. So, last night, 2 mysterious strangers appear on the train. The sleeping car conductor, whose appearance was described by Hardman, and who was seen by Hildegard Schmidt, Colonel Arbuthnot, and Mr. McQueen, and the woman in the scarlet kimono, a tall, slim woman seen by Pierre Michel, Miss Debenham, McQueen, and myself, and whom, if one may put that way, Colonel Arbuthnot scented. Who is she? Every female passenger, to a woman, claims she does not have a scarlet kimono. This woman also vanishes. Now then, are she and the mysterious conductor one and the same person, or not? And where are these 2 now? And by the way, where are the conductor's uniform and the scarlet kimono? That we can verify. Monsieur Book jumped up. We must search the passenger's luggage. Poirot also rose. I will permit myself one prediction. Do you know where these things are? Yes, I have an intuition about that as well. Well then, speak. Where? You will find the scarlet kimono in the luggage of one of the men, and the sleeping car conductor's uniform in the luggage of Hildegard Schmidt. Hildegard Schmidt? Then you think. Not at all what you think. I would put it this way. If Hildegard Schmidt is guilty, the uniform might be found in her luggage. But if she is innocent, the uniform will certainly be there. But how? Began Monsieur Book and stopped. What is that noise? He exclaimed. It sounds as if a locomotive is charging in here. The noise grew louder. Shrill female screams alternated with angry exclamations. The door of the carriage flew open, and Mistress Hubbard burst into the restaurant. How horrible! She shrieked. No! Just think of it. How horrible! In my bag, right in my sponge bag, a huge knife, all covered in blood. She swayed and fell unconscious. Chapter 14. The evidence, the weapon. Monsieur Book, with more energy than etiquette, caught the fainting lady and sat her down, shifting her head from his chest onto the table. Dr. Constantine called for a waiter, who rushed to their aid immediately. Hold her head, said the doctor. "And if she comes to, give her a little cognac." "Understood." He then hurried out of the room after the others. He was keenly interested in the crime, but not at all in elderly ladies in a faint. It is quite likely that this brush treatment helped Mrs. Hubbard recover quickly. A few minutes later, she was sitting up on her own, sipping cognac from a glass brought by the waiter and chattering away without pause. "You have no idea what a horror this is. No, you cannot possibly understand. I have been extremely sensitive since I was a child. The mere sight of blood, ugh, why, I am still shaking just thinking about it." The waiter offered her the glass again. "Encore un peu?" "Encore un peu. Do you think I should?" "Actually, I never touch a drop of spirits. I have never had wine or cognac in my life. We are all teetotalers in my family, for medicinal purposes." And she took another sip from a glass. Meanwhile, Poirot and Monsieur Book, with Dr. Constantine not a step behind, raced to Mrs. Hubbard's compartment. It seemed as if every single passenger had poured out into the corridor. The conductor, his face distorted with despair, was trying to force them back into their compartments. "Mais il n'y a rien à voir. Mais il n'y a rien à voir." He irritably repeated this sentiment in various languages. "Let us through," said Monsieur Book, deftly using his round little belly to part the crowd of passengers, and entered the compartment. Poirot squeezed in after him. "I am very glad you have come, monsieur," said the conductor with a sigh of relief. "Everyone, literally everyone, is trying to get in here. That American lady screamed so loud, you would think she was being murdered. I ran here at once, but she was screaming like a madwoman, shouting that she had to see you immediately, rushing down the carriage, telling everyone she met what had happened to her." He waved his hand and added, "There it is, monsieur. I have touched nothing." On the handle of the door, leading to the adjoining compartment, hung a rubberized checkered bag, a dagger in the pseudo-oriental style, a cheap imitation with a chased handle and a straight, tapering blade, lay on the floor beneath it, where Mrs. Hubbard had dropped it. On the blade, there were stains that looked like rust. Poirot carefully picked up the dagger. "Yes," he murmured, "there can be no mistake. Here is our missing weapon. Is that not so, doctor?" The doctor examined the dagger, holding it gingerly by the tips of his fingers. "It is a waste of effort," said Poirot. "There will be no fingerprints on it, except perhaps those of Mrs. Hubbard." The doctor's inspection of the weapon was brief. "This is the dagger, without a doubt," he confirmed. "It could have caused any of those wounds. I implore you, my friend, do not be too quick to jump to conclusions." The doctor was surprised. There are already too many coincidences in this case. 2 people decided to kill Mr. Ratchet last night. It would be too incredible if each of them had chosen the exact same weapon. As for that coincidence, it is not as incredible as it might seem, the doctor said. These pseudo-oriental daggers are manufactured in large batches and sold in the bazaars of Constantinople. "You have comforted me somewhat, but only somewhat," said Poirot. He looked thoughtfully at the door handle, removed the bag, and turned the handle. The door did not open. The bolt, located about 30 centimeters above the handle, was shot across. Poirot pulled back the bolt and pushed the door again. It did not budge. "You remember, we locked the door from the other side," said the doctor. "You are right," Poirot agreed absently. He seemed lost in thought. His forehead was wrinkled with furrows. He was clearly puzzled. "It all fits, does it not?" said Monsieur Book. The murderer decided to exit into the corridor through this compartment. While closing the door to the adjoining room, he felt the bag and thrust the blood-stained dagger into it. Then, unaware that he had woken Mrs. Hubbard, the criminal slipped out through the door leading to the corridor. "Yes, of course. Obviously, it must have happened as you say," Poirot murmured, but his face still showed a look of bewilderment. "What is the matter?" asked Monsieur Book. "Does something about this version dissatisfy you?" Poirot glanced at him quickly. "And you did not notice it?" "Apparently not. However, it is a mere trifle." The conductor looked into the compartment. The American lady is returning. Dr. Constantine looked guilty. He realized he had treated Mrs. Hubbard rather unceremoniously, but she had no intention of reproaching him. Her fervor was entirely directed elsewhere. "I will tell you straight and without ceremony," she blurted out as soon as she appeared in the doorway. "I will not stay in this compartment for anything. You could give me all the gold in the world, and I still would not sleep here. But, madam, I know what you're going to say, and I tell you right now, I will not do it. I would rather sit in the corridor all night." She began to cry. If my daughter knew, if she could see this, why she would... Poirot firmly interrupted her. "You misunderstand me, madam. Your request is perfectly reasonable. Your luggage will be moved to another compartment immediately." Mrs. Hubbard took her handkerchief from her eyes. "Really? I feel better already. But every compartment in this carriage is occupied, unless one of the gentlemen—" "Your luggage, madam," Monsieur Book intervened, "will be moved from this carriage to another. You will be given a compartment in the adjoining carriage. It was attached in Belgrade. That is just wonderful. I am not hysterical, of course, but sleeping here, with a corpse right there behind the wall—" She shuddered. "No, it is more than I can bear. Michel," Monsieur Book called out, "move the lady's luggage to any vacant compartment in the Athens-Paris coach." "Understood, monsieur. Into a compartment just like this one? Compartment number 3? No, no." Poirot countered quickly before his friend could answer. "I think madam will feel better if nothing reminds her of her previous surroundings. Give her another compartment. Number 12, for example." "Very well, monsieur." The conductor grabbed the luggage. Mrs. Hubbard overflowed with gratitude. "You are so kind to me. Monsieur Poirot, you have shown such sensitivity. I assure you, I know how to appreciate it. It is nothing. We will go with you and see that you are settled comfortably." Mrs. Hubbard, accompanied by the 3 men, set off for her new quarters. "This is very nice," she said, looking around. "Do you like it? You see, this compartment is no different from your old one." "That is true, except the berth is on the other side. However, that does not matter at all. After all, trains change direction all the time. I always tell my daughter, I want to travel facing the engine, and she says to me, 'What is the use of choosing compartment if the train goes one way when you go to sleep and the other way when you wake up?' And she was right. For instance, yesterday evening in Belgrade, we came in one way and went out the other. But now, madam, are you quite satisfied?" "Well, I wouldn't say that. We are stuck in the snowdrifts, and nobody is doing anything to get us out, and my boat sails the day after tomorrow." "Madam," said Monsieur Book, "we are all in the same position." "You are right," Mrs. Hubbard agreed. "But then, none of you had a murderer breaking into your room in the middle of the night." "There is one thing I still cannot understand," said Poirot. "How could the murderer have entered your compartment if the door to the adjoining room was bolted, as you say? Are you sure the bolt was fastened?" "But of course. That Swedish lady checked the bolt right before my eyes. Let's try to reconstruct the scene. You are lying in your berth, like this. From there, as you have said, it is impossible to see whether the door is bolted or not. Is that correct?" "Yes. I couldn't see a thing because my handbag was hanging on the handle. Oh, goodness. Now I shall have to buy a new handbag. I feel quite faint whenever I even look at it." Poirot picked up the bag and hung it on the handle of the door leading to the adjoining compartment. "Quite so," he said. "Now it is all clear to me. The bolt is positioned directly under the handle, and the bag hides it. From your berth, you could not see whether the door was locked or not. And isn't that exactly what I told you? This Swedish lady, Miss Olsen, stood right here between you and the door. She rattled the bolt and told you that the door was locked. That is exactly what happened. And yet, she might have been mistaken, madam. You will soon see why." Poirot explained patiently. "The bolt is a simple metal bar. Here it is. If you turn to the right, the door is locked. To the left, it is open. It is possible that she simply pushed the door, and since it was already locked from the other side, she assumed it was locked from your side as well. Well, that was very stupid of her. Madam, kind and helpful people are not always the most intelligent. Well, that is certainly the truth. By the way, madam, did you travel to Smyrna by this same route? No, I took a boat to Istanbul. There I was met by a friend of my daughter's, a Mr. Johnson. Such a delightful man. You really must meet him. And he showed me Istanbul. I must say, the city disappointed me. Nothing but ruins. And all those mosques where they make you wear slippers. Now, where was I? You were saying that Mr. Johnson met you. Yes. He put me on a French cargo ship. It was going to Smyrna, and my son-in-law was already waiting for me right there on the pier. Oh, what will he say when he hears about all this? My daughter insisted that this way was the simplest and most comfortable. Just stay in your compartment all the way to Paris, she told me, and an American tourist company representative will meet you there. Oh, heavens! How am I going to cancel my steamship ticket? I suppose I have to notify the company? No, this is simply terrible. And Mrs. Hubbard began to cry once more. Poirot, who was already fidgeting in his seat, hastened to interrupt the talkative lady. You have been through such an ordeal, madam. We shall ask the waiter to bring you some tea and biscuits. I don't care much for tea, Mrs. Hubbard said pitifully. It is only the English who drink tea for every occasion. Then coffee, madam. You must recover your spirits. That cognac has made my head spin. I believe I really would like some coffee. Excellent. You must keep up your strength. Goodness, you do say the funniest things. But first, madam, a small formality. Would you permit us to search your luggage? Whatever for? We intend to search the luggage of all the passengers. I would rather not mention it, but remember what was found in your handbag. Lord have mercy. Another surprise like that, and it will be the end of me. The inspection was carried out very quickly. Mrs. Hubbard did not have much luggage. A hat box, a cheap suitcase, and a bulging Gladstone bag. Her belongings were of the simplest and most ordinary kind. Had it not been for Mrs. Hubbard delaying the process by constantly showing photographs of her daughter and her two rather plain-looking children, my daughter's babies, aren't they just precious? They would have finished the search in 2 minutes. Chapter 15, The Passenger's Luggage. After squeezing out a few polite phrases and assuring Mrs. Hubbard that her coffee was on its way, Poirot and his companions finally took their leave. Well, said Monsieur Book, we have drawn a blank for a start. Whom shall we tackle next? I think the simplest way is to go through the compartments in order, replied Poirot. Therefore, we shall begin with number 16, the amiable Mr. Hardman. Mr. Hardman, who was smoking a cigar, greeted them with the utmost cordiality. Come in, gentlemen. That is, if you can all squeeze in. It is a bit tight for a crowd like this. Monsieur Book explained the purpose of their visit, and the big detective nodded understandingly. I don't mind, to tell you the truth. I was beginning to wonder why you hadn't gotten around to it sooner. Here are my keys. Do you want to search my pockets, too? I am at your service. Shall I get the suitcases down? The conductor will attend to that. Michel. Mr. Hardman's 2 bags were quickly examined and returned to their owner. They contained nothing unusual, except for a somewhat generous supply of spirits. Mr. Hardman winked. They don't look too closely at luggage at the borders, especially if you grease the conductor's palm. I handed him a stack of Turkish notes right away, and I haven't had any trouble since. And in Paris? Mr. Hardman winked again. By the time I get to Paris, all my liquor will fit into a small shampoo bottle. I see you are no supporter of prohibition, Mr. Hardman, Monsieur Book said with a smile. To tell you the truth, prohibition never really bothered me, Hardman replied. I see. You frequent the speakeasies, said Monsieur Book, pronouncing the last word with great relish. These specific American expressions, they are so expressive, so original. I should like to visit America, said Poirot. Yes, you'd learn some progressive methods over there, said Hardman. Europe needs a bit of shake-up, or it'll go completely stale. America is certainly a progressive country, Poirot agreed. I am with you there, and personally, I find much to like about Americans. But I must say, though you will perhaps think me old-fashioned, that I find American women far less appealing than my own countrywomen. To my mind, nothing can compare to a Frenchwoman or a Belgian. They are so coquettish, so feminine. Hardman turned away for a moment and stared out at the snowdrifts through the window. Perhaps you are right, Monsieur Poirot, he said, but I reckon a man always prefers his own countrywomen. He blinked as if the snow were dazzling him. It really hurts the eyes, doesn't it? He remarked. Say what you like, gentlemen, but this gets on my nerves. The murder, the snow, and everything else, but mostly the doing nothing, just hanging around while time slips away. I am not used to sitting with my hands folded. You are as energetic as becomes an American. Poirot smiled. The conductor placed the bags back on the rack, and they moved to the next compartment. There, in the corner, puffing on a pipe, Colonel Arbuthnot was reading a magazine. Poirot explained the purpose of their visit. The colonel raised no objection. His luggage consisted of 2 heavy leather suitcases. The rest of my things I sent by sea, he explained. Like most military men, the colonel was an expert at packing, so the inspection took only a few minutes. Poirot noticed a packet of pipe cleaners. Do you always use this particular brand of cleaners? He asked. Almost always, if I can get hold of them. I see. Poirot nodded. The cleaners were identical to the one found in the murdered man's compartment. When they stepped out into the corridor, Dr. Constantine mentioned this fact. And yet, Poirot murmured, I do not believe it. It is not in his character. And if we admit that, then we must admit he cannot be the murderer. The door of the next compartment was closed. It was occupied by Princess Dragomirov. They knocked, and in response, heard the princess's deep contralto. Enter. Monsieur Book acted as the intermediary. Politely and respectfully, he explained the reason for their visit. The princess listened in silence. Her tiny, toad-like face remained expressionless. If it is necessary, gentlemen, she said calmly when Monsieur Book had finished, then there is nothing more to be said. My maid has the keys. She will show you everything. Are your keys always with your maid, madam? Poirot asked. Certainly, monsieur. And if the customs officers require a trunk to be open at a border during the night? The old woman shrugged her shoulders. That is hardly likely, but in such an event, the conductor would fetch my maid. So, you trust her absolutely, madam? I have already told you so, the princess said coldly. I do not keep people about me whom I do not trust. Yes, said Poirot thoughtfully. Loyalty is rare these days. Perhaps it is better to have a plain servant who is dependable than a more chic maid, an elegant Parisian, for example. The princess's dark, searching eyes rose slowly to his. What are you implying, Monsieur Poirot? I, madam? Nothing at all. But yes, you think, do you not, that an elegant Frenchwoman should be in charge of my toilets? It would, perhaps, be more natural, madam. The princess shook her head. Schmidt is devoted to me. She emphasized the last word. And devotion is beyond price. The maid arrived with the keys. The princess, speaking in German, ordered her to unpack the suitcases and assist with the inspection. She herself stepped out into the corridor and stood looking at the snow through the window. Poirot joined her, leaving Monsieur Book to search the luggage. The princess looked at Poirot with a faint, weary smile. And does it not interest you, monsieur, to see what is in my suitcases? Poirot shook his head. It is a mere formality, madam. Are you so sure of that? In your case, yes. And yet, I knew and loved Sonia Armstrong. What do you think of that? That I would not soil my hands with the murder of such a scoundrel as Cassetti? Perhaps you are right. She was silent for a minute or two. Then she said, Do you know what I would have done with such a man, had I the power? I would have called my servants and commanded, Flog him to death and throw him on the refuse heap. That is how things were done in the days of my youth, monsieur. Poirot made no reply to this. You are silent, Monsieur Poirot. I wonder, what are you thinking? The princess said with sudden vehemence. Poirot looked her in the eyes. I am thinking, madam, that you have a very strong will, but your hands are not strong at all. She looked down at her thin fingers, clad in black silk and loaded with rings, resembling claws. It is true, my hands are very weak. I do not know whether to be glad or sorry for it. And, turning abruptly, she went back into the compartment where her maid was busily repacking the cases. The princess cut Monsieur Book's apologies short. There is no need to apologize, monsieur, she said. A murder has been committed. Therefore, these measures are necessary. That is all. You are very kind, madam. They bowed, and the princess gave a slight nod in return. The doors of the next two compartments were closed. Monsieur Book stopped and scratched his head. The devil! This threatens to be awkward. They have diplomatic passports. Their luggage is exempt from search. From a customs search, yes, when it is a matter of murder. I know, and yet I should like to avoid international complications. Do not be distressed, my friend. The Count and Countess are reasonable people. They will understand. Did you see how gracious Princess Dragomirov was? She is a true aristocrat. And although these two move in the same circles, the Count did not strike me as a very easygoing man. He was quite displeased when you insisted on questioning his wife. A search will annoy him even more. Suppose we skip them? After all, what possible connection could they have with this business? Why should I bring unnecessary trouble upon myself? I cannot agree with you, said Poirot. I am sure Count Andrenyi will act reasonably. In any case, let's at least try. And before Monsieur Book could object, Poirot knocked loudly on the door of compartment 13. A voice from within called out, Enter. The Count was sitting near the door, reading a newspaper. The Countess was curled up in the corner opposite him. A pillow was tucked under her head. She appeared to be sleeping. Pardon, Count, Poirot began. Forgive this intrusion. The fact is, we are searching the luggage of all the passengers. In most cases, it is a simple, though necessary, formality. Monsieur Book suggests that, as a diplomat, you might wish to claim exemption from this search. The Count reflected for a moment. Thank you, he said, but I should prefer not to have any exception made. I would rather our luggage were searched exactly like that of the other passengers. I hope you do not mind, Elena, he added, turning to his wife. Not at all, the Countess answered without the slightest hesitation. The inspection was carried out quickly and somewhat superficially. Poirot appeared almost embarrassed. He kept making irrelevant remarks. For instance, as he picked up a blue morocco case embossed with a crown and the Countess's initials, he remarked, There is a damp label on your suitcase, madam. The Countess made no reply. During the search, she sat curled up in the corner, staring out the window with an air of boredom. Closing the inspection, Poirot opened a small cabinet above the wash basin and cast a fleeting glance at its contents. A sponge, some face cream, powder, and a small bottle labeled Trianal. After an exchange of polite farewells, the investigating party withdrew. Following the Hungarian's compartment were those of Mrs. Hubbard, the murdered man, and Poirot himself. Therefore, they moved on to the second-class carriages. The first compartment, berths 10 and 11, was occupied by Mary Debenham, who was reading a book when they entered, and Greta Olsen, who was fast asleep but startled awake at the sound of the door. Poirot, with his habitual apology, informed the ladies that a search was to be conducted. The Swedish lady was flustered, while Mary Debenham remained impassive. Poirot turned to the Swede. With your permission, mademoiselle, we shall attend to your luggage first. After that, I would be much obliged if you would go and see how our Mrs. Hubbard is faring. We have moved her to the next carriage, but she is still quite overcome by her discovery. I have ordered coffee for her, but I feel she is the kind of person who needs a listener above all else. The kind-hearted Swedish woman was instantly filled with sympathy. Yes, she would go to the American lady at once. Poor lady, Such a terrible shock, and she was already so distressed by the journey and the parting from her daughter. She would go immediately. Her suitcase was not locked, and she would certainly take her smelling salts with her. She hurried out into the corridor. The inspection of her belongings took very little time. They were pathetically meager. She had evidently not yet noticed the missing wire mesh from her hat box. Miss Debenham put down her book and watched Poirot. She handed him the keys to her suitcase without a word, and when it was opened, she asked, "Why did you send her away, Monsieur Poirot?" "Send her away? To look after the American lady. Why else?" "A very good pretext, but a pretext nonetheless." "I do not understand you, mademoiselle." "I think you understand me very well." She smiled. "You wanted to speak to me alone, didn't you?" "I said nothing of the sort, mademoiselle." "But you thought it. Confess you did." "Mademoiselle, we have a proverb. Qu'est excuse, excuse. Is that what you're going to say? Admit that I am not lacking in common sense or powers of observation. You have somehow decided that I know something about this business. The murder of a man I had never seen in my life. Pure imagination, mademoiselle." "No, not imagination at all. And I think we are wasting time, hiding the truth, beating about the bush, instead of coming straight to the point." "You do not like wasting time? You prefer to take the bull by the horns? You like frankness and directness? Very well, then. I shall act with the directness you so admire. I shall ask you the meaning of certain words I happened to overhear on the journey from Syria. At Konya, I stepped out of the carriage to, as you English say, stretch my legs. It was quiet, and I heard voices, yours and the Colonel's. You said to him, 'Not now, when it is all over, when it is behind us.' What did those words mean, mademoiselle?" "Do you think I was referring to murder?" she asked calmly. "It is I who ask the questions here, mademoiselle." She sighed and grew thoughtful. "Those words had a meaning of their own, monsieur," she said after a moment, as if waking from a dream. "But what was, I cannot tell you. I can only give you my word of honor that I never set eyes on Ratchet until I boarded this train." "I see. So you refuse to explain those words?" "Yes, if you choose to put it that way. I refuse. They referred to a certain task I had undertaken." "And you have completed it?" "What do you mean? You have completed it, have you not?" "What makes you think so?" "Listen to me, mademoiselle. I shall remind you of another instance. On the day we were due to arrive in Istanbul, the train was late. You were very agitated then, mademoiselle. You, who are usually so calm and self-possessed, lost your composure completely. I was afraid of missing my connection. So you said, 'But the Orient Express, mademoiselle, leaves Istanbul every day. Even if you had missed a train, you would only have been delayed by 24 hours. Mary Debenham showed the first signs of impatience. You do not seem to understand that a person may be expected by friends, and a 24-hour delay upsets every plan and can cause a great deal of inconvenience. Ah, so that was it? You were expected by friends and did not wish to inconvenience them?" "Exactly. And yet it is strange." "What is strange?" "We board the Orient Express, and again we are late. This time the delay brings far more serious consequences. From here, one can neither send a telegram to your friends nor warn them by, what is the English word? Long distance telephone. Trunk call, you mean?" "Precisely." Mary Debenham smiled despite herself. "I quite agree with you. It is very unpleasant when one cannot warn one's people either by telegram or telephone. And yet, mademoiselle, this time you are acting quite differently. You show no sign of impatience. You are full of philosophical calm." Mary Debenham flushed, bit her lip, and grew serious. "You have not answered me, mademoiselle." "I am sorry. I did not realize there was anything to answer. How do you explain such a change in your behavior, mademoiselle? Don't you think you are making a mountain out of a molehill, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot spread his hands apologetically. "That is the common failing of all detectives. We always look for logic in human behavior. We fail to account for changes of mood. Mary Debenham made no reply. Do you know Colonel Arbuthnot well, mademoiselle? It seemed to Poirot that the girl was relieved by the change of subject. I met him for the first time on this journey. Have you any reason to suspect that he knew Ratchet? She shook her head. I am quite sure he did not. Why are you so sure? He told me so. And yet, mademoiselle, we found a pipe cleaner on the floor of the murdered man's compartment, and of all the passengers, only the colonel smokes a pipe. Poirot watched the girl closely. However, her face remained impassive. Nonsense. It is absurd, she said. I would never believe that Colonel Arbuthnot could be involved in a crime, especially one as melodramatic as this. Poirot was inclined to agree with her, and he almost said so. Instead, he remarked, I must remind you, mademoiselle, that you do not know the colonel very well. She shrugged her shoulders. I am well acquainted with men of his type. Do you still refuse to explain the meaning of the words? When it is all over, Poirot asked with pointed politeness. I have nothing more to say to you, she replied coldly. It does not matter, said Poirot. I shall find out for myself. He gave a bow and left the compartment, closing the door behind him. Was that wise, my friend? Asked Monsieur Book. Now she will be on her guard, and consequently, the colonel will be on his guard too. My friend, when you want to catch a rabbit, you put a ferret into the hole, and if the rabbit is there, he runs. That is what I have done. They entered Hildegard Schmidt's compartment. The maid stood by the door, greeting her visitors respectfully and with perfect calm. Poirot quickly examined the contents of her small valise. Then he signaled to the conductor to take down the large trunk from the rack. Do you have the keys? He asked the maid. The trunk is not locked, monsieur. Poirot unfastened the straps and raised the lid. Aha, he said, turning to Monsieur Book. Do you remember what I told you? Look at this. Lying right on top of the trunk was a carelessly folded brown uniform of a wagon-lit conductor. The phlegmatic German woman was startled. Oh, she cried, that is not mine. I never put anything like that in there. I have not looked into that trunk since we left Istanbul. Believe me, I am not deceiving you. She turned her pleading eyes from one man to the other. Poirot took her hand kindly, trying to reassure her. Please, do not be distressed. We believe you. Do not worry. I am as sure that you did not hide the uniform as I am sure that you are an excellent cook. You are an excellent cook, are you not? The maid was clearly bewildered, yet she could not help but break into a smile. That is true. All my mistresses have said so. She faltered, her mouth dropping open, a look of terror appearing on her face. Do not be afraid, said Poirot. You have no reason to be anxious. Listen, I will tell you how it happened. A man in a conductor's uniform leaves the victim's compartment. He runs into you in the corridor. He did not expect that. He had hoped that no one would see him. What was he to do? He had to get rid of the uniform, because if earlier it served as a disguise, now it could only betray him. Poirot looked at Monsieur Book and Dr. Constantine, who were listening intently. The train is stalled in the snowdrifts. The blizzard has ruined the criminal's plans. Where could he hide the uniform? All the compartments are occupied. But wait, not all of them. He passes an open compartment. There's no one inside. It must belong to the woman he just encountered in the corridor, slipping into compartment. He quickly sheds a uniform and stuffs it into the trunk on the upper rack, hoping it will not be discovered for some time. And then, asked Monsieur Book, that is something we must still consider. Poirot gave his friend a meaningful look. He picked up the tunic. The third button from the bottom was missing. Thrusting his hand into the pocket, Poirot withdrew a pass key, the kind used by conductors to open the compartments. And there's the explanation of how our conductor could pass through locked doors, said Monsieur Book. You were right not to wonder whether Mrs. Hubbard's door was locked or not. This man could have entered anyway. After all, If he provided himself with a uniform, why shouldn't he provide himself with a passkey? Why not, indeed, said Poirot. We should have realized this long ago. Remember, Michel said that the door to Mrs. Hubbard's compartment was locked when he answered her bell. That is so, monsieur, said Conductor. That is why I thought the lady had imagined it all. But now everything becomes clear, Monsieur Book continued. He surely intended to lock the communicating door as well, but Mrs. Hubbard must have stirred, and that frightened him away. So, said Poirot, now all that remained for us is to find the scarlet kimono. True, the last two compartments are occupied by men. We shall search them regardless. Certainly, I remember what you said. Hector McQueen readily places suitcases at their disposal. So, you have finally got around to me, he said with a wry smile. I am undoubtedly the most suspicious passenger on the entire train. Now, all you have to do is find out where the old man left me all his money, and the case is closed. Monsieur Book looked at the secretary with some distrust. That was a joke, McQueen added hastily. To tell you the truth, he wouldn't have left me a cent, of course. I was useful to him, languages, and all that sort of thing, but nothing more. If you only speak English, and with an American accent at that, you are liable to be swindled at every turn. I am no great linguist myself, but I can get by in French, German, and Italian in shops and hotels. McQueen was speaking somewhat louder than usual. Although he had readily agreed to the search, he was clearly a little on edge. Poirot stepped out into the corridor. We found nothing, he said. Not even a will in your favor. McQueen gave a sigh of relief. That's a weight off my mind, he grinned. They moved on to the next compartment. The inspection of the belongings of the big Italian, and the valet yielded no results. The men stopped at the end of the corridor and exchanged glances. What next? Asked Monsieur Book. Let us return to the restaurant car, said Poirot. We have learned all we can. We have heard the passengers' evidence. We have searched the luggage, and we have seen a few things for ourselves. Now, all that remains is for us to think. Poirot reached into his pocket for his cigarette case. It was empty. I shall join you in a moment, he said. I need my cigarettes. This case is very confusing and most unusual. Who was wearing that scarlet kimono? Where is it now, I wonder? There's a clue in this case, some detail that keeps eluding me. The matter, I repeat, is confused because it has been deliberately confused. We shall discuss everything shortly. Wait for me just 1 minute. Poirot walked quickly down the corridor to his own compartment. He remembered that he had some cigarettes in one of his suitcases. Taking the case down from the rack, he flicked the lock open, and then he recoiled, staring at the suitcase in utter astonishment. Lying neatly folded on the very top was a scarlet silk kimono embroidered with dragons. Aha! He murmured. So that is how it is. A challenge. Very well, I accept it.